welcome back to London Climate Action Week here in the heart of the UK's capital city of London. We are a stone's throw from the House of Commons on the South Bank here at County Hall, and we are in the offices of Sustainable Ventures. And thank you very much to Sustainable Ventures for being our hosts, and we're happy to be your guest. We're going to talk a bit about Santa Marta in Colombia, where a very important event happened in terms of a kind of renewed or refreshed or, well, even exciting climate diplomacy, with just under 60 countries in the world coming to this city in Colombia, hosted by the Netherlands and the government of Colombia, to talk about exiting from fossil fuels. And hoping, I think, over time that this coalition of the willing, I was told by the Dutch minister yesterday when I interviewed her, it's the coalition of the doing. So that's quite exciting too. There were a lot of issues on the table in Santa Marta in terms of getting off fossil fuels, and financing was obviously an absolutely key one. And we've got some guests here, some of them whom were in Santa Marta, and also to talk about this issue of finance. How do we finance the exit, and what did Santa Marta maybe deliver on the table, which can be built upon as we go forward to the next climate conference in Turkey, and also the meeting next year of the Transition Away from Fossil Fuel Conference in Tuvalu. Have I got that right? Yes, I nearly said Vanuatu, which would have been a disgrace. Okay, some great guests here. Mariana Paoli. Is that okay? Yes. Not bad. All right. She's Global Policy and Advocacy Climate Lead at Oxfam International. Great to see you again. We've got Nick Robbins, Senior Director, Finance and Private Sector, World Resources Institute. Ralph Charmi, who is CEO and co-founder of the Blue Green Future. And last but not least, Natasha Green, Country Lead. I've got you as Australia E3G, which is a global think tank, isn't it?
Yes, that's
But
correct.
I know there's many other things that you're involved in too. But that's great to have you here, particularly with Australia being the host with Turkey of the next climate conference in later this year. Let me go to Marina first. I mean, you were in Santa Marta at the Transition Away from Fossil Fuel Conference. What do you think were the main outcomes regarding climate finance, and what might it mean for the just transition?
I'm happy you mentioned that the Dutch said it would be a coalition of the doing, because this is what we need moving next. The way we're going to judge success is actually based on how much rich countries will move away from fossil fuels first and fast, and what is that finance that must be provided for poor countries to move away in a just manner. And this is still to be seen, still to be put on the table. We saw the report that was launched earlier in the London Climate Week from the conference, which can give us good pointers, because one of the core pillars is addressing economic dependencies, is the fact that many of the poor countries are in debt and they have to use the revenue of the fossil fuels extraction to pay their debts. So we need to address that dependency. For example, IMF conditionalities to sometimes that encourage those countries to extract fossil fuels must end. They have to have a better access to capital. Addressing cost of capital is absolutely essential. And we need a reform in the global debt system, through the adoption like a UN debt convention to address all the issues they're going through. Fiscal space in the global south. It was also in the report was mentioned how much developing countries are losing due to tax avoidance, tax evasions, illicit financial flows. Again, there is a UN tax convention being negotiated at the moment, which could strengthen them and also enable rich polluters to be taxed. So recognizing that the fiscal space in the global south is essential for a just transition to happen, not just for the just transition, but actually finance is essential for all areas of climate action, including what needs to be done under the UNFCCC, has to be one of the drivers. Of course, the Santa Marta was the beginning of the process, and one of the pillars, that dependency is recognized. But without the finance, no transition will happen, and no transition will happen in a just manner. And the public finance element is the core one we have to look at moving forward. So in the preparations for the next conference in Tuvalu, there'll be lots of works on the making. It's important that countries send the signal and take the action to strengthen this other UN process addressing the debt, the tax, and provide the public finance to enable climate action for these developing countries.
Okay, so stay with us. We'll come back on that. I mean, I just wanted to add that you did do a poll, didn't you, just before the conference in Santa Marta that found that 68% of citizens supported increasing taxes on the profits of large fossil fuel companies to help fund the transition. And we can come back and maybe ask why that isn't going further. I think we can probably guess, but we'll come back on that in a moment. Nick Robbins, you co-led the work stream on central banking, and that was a very interesting part of the conference indeed. What can the central banks do? What's your takeaway from the overall conference, and what is the role of central banks in financing a just transition?
Well, I think I'll build on what Mariana was saying. So,
Nick, keep that microphone close to your mouth.
I will build on what Mariana has been saying.
Yep.
So what I think made Santa Marta special, it originated in the climate talks. And it would have always been an interesting meeting. It became a very significant meeting because it was the first intergovernmental meeting following the US and Israeli attack on Iran and the fossil fuel crisis that we saw as a result of that. And I think it was this dimension of the long-term problems of climate change, of course, which we're seeing manifested in loss and damage right now, with this short-term shock. So most countries in the world are fossil fuel importers. Most developing countries are not fossil fuel producers, they're fossil fuel importers. And so actually this is a major issue about making sure that the finance for these countries to transition away. So many Pacific countries, 95% of electricity is from diesel generation. It's crazy, it's crazy. So as we're thinking about this shock, this fossil shock, the institutions in every country that is responsible for this are central banks. Yeah, they're responsible for inflation. This is a big inflation shock. It's hitting low-income communities, businesses, small businesses, the hardest. And so we gathered about 8 central banks, former central bankers, existing central bankers, China, Brazil, Colombia, Chile, Spain, ECB, and so on, to really think about how fossil fuel dependence and getting away from fossil fuels fits as part of their monetary policy and their prudential policy objectives. And it was a very powerful debate, and we're very pleased to see that the result of that is recognized in the report, which is released here by the Dutch and the Colombians. And so we've set up what's called the Santa Marta Transition and Financial Stability Group, brings together researchers and central banks to really think, what is the next phase of sustainable central banking? So how do we ensure, as central banks have to rein in what's called fossilflation caused by the second fossil war we're seeing now, that we don't have an unthinking increase in interest rates, which is obviously going to constrain our ability to invest in clean energy, which is now, we know, the most stability enhancing investment you can make. So we're entering a new phase of central banking. And what was very important about this is that there is a strong role on price, a strong role on prudential, making sure that the financial system has integrity, but particularly in developing countries, a strong role around financial inclusion. And central banks in developing countries have a financial inclusion role, which is crucial to the just transition, allowing access to finance for households, for small businesses, and so on. So we're now continuing that work. We'll have a whole series of meetings and research leading up to the next conference. But it really is a sort of new dimension to this transition away from fossil fuels. In fact, we have central bankers, European Central Bank board member Frank Alderson, recognizing that fossil fuel dependence is a threat to Europe's price stability.
Yeah. That was an amazing announcement or comment by him, which was, I think, unprecedented from the ECB.
And that will be the same for the central banker in Fiji, or the central banker in many developing countries as well. So I think this is a new way in which we can encourage the transition. Amongst, I think in most countries, the most sort of stable institution of government.
Yeah. I have to tell you that I bumped into an old friend of mine the other day who is ex-BBC correspondent, and he said that the fossil fuel industry always told us that renewables were intermittent and not always available. Now we've learned the same goes for fossil fuels, right? In fact, more so, very intermittent and totally unavailable for quite large periods, which was a good point. Ralph, you worked at the International Monetary Fund for many years. A lot of relevance in this issue of climate finance. There are calls for reform of the International Monetary Fund and other big financial institutions. What do you see in terms of your work, the global financial institutions, in terms of climate finance? Can they play a better role than maybe they have in the past? Is there a sunny future for the big financial institutions like the IMF? Yes or no? I mean, what do they do from here?
Yes. The answer is, of course, yes. I look at this as an opportunity for the Bretton Woods institutions to reform themselves. Because what they were set up to do in 45 is not what we need them to do in our day and age or for the future. For example, just to go back to what my colleague was saying here, I'm an IMF mission chief. I was an IMF mission chief. I spent 25 years at the IMF. And I know all about debt sustainability issues and fiscal space and all this stuff. But when we gave advice on debt sustainability for countries, we never really looked at how that advice impacts, for example, the natural space. For example, the natural capital in that country.
Forests and things like that.
Absolutely, because really, if you allow me to take one step back, the real issue around this is that the way we measure GDP. Anything you can kill or extract enters the GDP. So anything you can kill acquires a price, right? Grab a fish, swimming, as Sylvia Earle would say, frolicking freely in the ocean, suffocate her, put it on a plate, it acquires $30 a plate or $50 a plate. Look at a beautiful tree. Ask anybody passing, if it's not a fruit tree, what's the value of that tree? They'll say, oh, timber. See? So in death, whatever we can cut, extract, acquires a price. The problem we are facing is what keeps us alive has a zero price. And what keeps us alive is the living nature. So from my own perspective as a professional economist, the issue is how we measure GDP. So when you tell me we need to reform, yes, of course, but where do you want to start? You want to start with the paradigm. The paradigm itself is based on dead and extracted nature. Oil, gas, minerals, food, all of that is extracted and put through the production process. So what's missing is the living nature is missing. So when you want to reform, that means it does, and then you have to ask yourself the question, does living nature have a value? And the answer is, of course it is. Seagrass, salt marsh, mangroves, living trees are the ones who absorb carbon from the atmosphere. Forests are responsible for the rains. You see? So all of this, if you have coral reefs, they're nurseries for fish, they provide tourism, they stave off flooding, living mangroves.
Yeah, this is very important. And I'm just wondering, there have been attempts to reform this kind of...
Not really. There have been calls for attempts. But if you want to reform it, what you really want to tell the IMF is that your debt sustainability, let me be sort of more practical, your debt sustainability analysis is divorced from ecological integrity. So when we give advice to a country, we say, for example, take Maldives. Maldives' debt to GDP is 120%. It's too high. So the advice would be, you need to reduce your debt. Well, how am I going to reduce my debt? Typical advice would be exactly what we're saying. You need to cut your expenditure on people, and you need to expand the revenue. Well, how am I going to expand the revenue? You can't attract more tourists, and being an offshore center is really a dying proposition. Do you have something that you can extract? You see? Do you have something, do you have trees? Cut them down, sell them as timber. Why don't you allow for gas and oil extraction? Why don't you allow for mineral extraction? So the advice on how to deal with the debt is devoid from the ecological side. And that's the problem. What we need to do is bring the two together, say there's no debt sustainability without ecological integrity. And the way to do that is to prove to people like me in the finance world, central banks and others, that the living nature has value, not only intrinsic value.
Okay.
Like all life is precious,
Yep.
that it has value. Take the seagrass of Bahamas. Seagrass of Bahamas captures so much carbon, it can, if they were to sell that carbon, they would acquire $12 billion just in protecting their seagrass. Mm-hmm. The corals of Maldives produce 2 billion out of 7 billion their GDP, but that's a living coral. That's a living seagrass. So nature has value. The problem is it's not in the GDP.
Yeah, GDP is a very crude measurement, isn't it?
Of that thing.
Yeah. It's about making things, and in the case of this, chopping down trees,
Exactly.
You get a lot for the logs, but you've got no river systems left. How are you going to survive? Yeah. Let's come back to this in a second. Let me introduce Natasha, or I've already introduced Natasha, but bring her in. So Australia, together with Turkey, will host the next COP31. Can't believe it's COP31, can you? It's just, it's like counting up to 10, but it's gone wild, COP31. The presidency announced this 35 by 35 roadmap, and I can see with a little badge saying electricity now. So this is 35% electrification by 2035. Where's the money going to come from for this?
It's a really good question and a very pertinent one. So the announcement, as you said, 35 by 35 was announced at Bonn, but actually yesterday during London Climate Action Week at the Global Energy Transition and Electrification Summit, the Electrify Now campaign was launched. And as part of the Electrify Now campaign, we've got a government coalition, including the UK, EU, Australia, Turkey, and Ethiopia as well, for the COP32 presidency next year, as well as over 40 organisations and alliances who have come together to sort of galvanise support for increasing and accelerating faster electrification, with the aim of increasing electricity share of final energy consumption from 21% now to 35% by 2035. How that will be financed is an incredibly critical question that we need to really draw attention to at the moment. And I think one thing we haven't touched on is actually donor finance, overseas development aid, is shrinking at the moment. It's an incredibly challenging area. We're seeing drawbacks kind of across the board. But the unique thing about electrification is, one, it enables transitioning away from fossil fuels. And two, electrification is not just a climate issue. It's one, it supports energy security, it creates kind of cost competitiveness, it's an affordability strategy, it enables energy access. And therefore that transitions or, turns the attention from just a climate finance issue to actually, one that's much more focused on development and economic development. And I think that's, really critical, because what we can do through this is look at different mechanisms to support increased finance towards electrification. Actually, over about 90% of global electrification will be financed through the private sector. Mm-hmm. So, how do we enable this through the COP, and indeed through other sort of, multilateral moments and institutions as well? I think the first thing is looking at MDBs, as we've already touched on. Thinking about, is there a target that MDBs could develop alongside
multilateral development banks?
Yes, thank you. Sorry,
sorry.
Speaking in acronyms, with the fall of us all. Multilateral development banks coming up with a target to accompany the 35% by 2035, looking at the existing architecture that already exists through the COPs. So how do we mobilise country platforms which really connect the sort of transitioning away from fossil fuel roadmaps with electrification, to look at how countries will lead themselves and therefore generate that local investment to support electrification. Things like aggregation platforms. I think one of the issues with sort of scaling up electrification is the demand that then puts on the grid. And for a lot of developing countries, where you've got sort of small communities who are not necessarily connected to the grid, you're then looking at small micro projects which aren't particularly attractive to large investors, particularly the private sector. So, could we look at an aggregation platform where we bring together multiple small projects to then create something like 1 gig, 2 gig, 5 gig worth of projects that then becomes a more attractive financial investment for the sort of financial architecture that exists. And finally, something that we haven't really connected yet, I think, in the sort of climate sphere is the growth of AI. And actually, London Climate Action Week, so E3G founded London Climate Action Week, and we're really excited this week that there are a number of events focused on AI. And AI has a role to play here, and I wonder if we can collectively sort of put our heads together to think about how AI centres can actually fund infrastructure for electrification, because the two are going to be deeply connected, as both sort of technologies develop. So I think there are sort of multiple tools that we can use here, one based on sort of the existing architecture we're working with, and two, thinking about sort of innovative solutions and how we think outside the box.
Let's hold that one there, because that's very interesting. I mean, we've got like 8 minutes left. I don't know how we're going to wrap this one up, right? And thread all these different needles here in this tapestry of wonderful ideas and commentary. But I mean, I suppose it might be as simple as saying that obviously finance is critical. We know it's going to be talked about. It's going to be a focus of the COP, of course, as always. What does Santa Marta need to do, the process need to do? There need to be some win-win-wins here, right? Some quick wins if this whole idea of exiting fossil fuels, a coalition of doing, actually is going to succeed. And where can we find quick wins in the finance? Your argument would be this is a moment for the IMFs and others to start pricing in the wider economy and the value of it, yes?
So let me just
let's go around. Each one of you has to answer this question.
Currently, the discussion, and I've been in many of those discussions, everybody presents you climate and nature as risks. I look at them as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Nature is a new asset. Living nature is a new asset. If you present living nature as a new asset class to the finance world, they'll pile in. But if we can keep talking about risks, right? But seagrass, salt marsh, mangroves are a new asset class. We never thought of them that way. We always thought of them as nature. Now, if you can make that argument convincingly to the finance world, you would unleash the trillions, because nature needs, after you account for philanthropy and government, you need $1 trillion a year to protect and save it. Where's it going to come from?
Right.
Only from the private sector. How do you bring the private sector? Not by proselytizing to them. It's not going to work. You have to say there is something for you in the protection and restoration of nature. You can put rules down, you can put regulations, but ultimately they have to see, what do I get out of it? So does living nature have value? Yes or no?
I buy this, and I also buy the fact that we all know there's some positivity going on in this field. It's how you scale it up in a way that works for the developing countries with lots of living nature. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, the UK is an impoverished, biodiversity poor, there's not much nature here to really, but in some parts of the world, it really is the capital of the people, right? And how do you actually, I hate the word monetize because I know it's got lots of connotations, but how do you ensure that they receive good volumes of finance for what they're actually protecting?
You bake it into the system.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's one thing to say we need finance, we need to bring the private sector, but you bring the finance sector with rules.
Right.
So
Nick's nodding over there.
Yeah.
So you got somebody on your side on that side. So that's good news. I'm on your side as well. I'm just trying to. Yes. Where do we get some quick wins on this in terms of finance?
We have to look at the quality of the finance. There are limits to private finance. Not all projects are bankable, and a number of public problems can't find private solutions. So public finance play a big role. And a quick win would really, as you said, most of the population are in favor of taxing the profits of fossil fuel companies. And so governments don't need to wait for international action. They can start implementing taxation at the national level now. They can implement windfall taxes. They can tax also the jets, or are ways to really increase.
Why are they not doing this more? I mean, because everybody's appalled about the profits they've been making recently, off the back of all kinds of questionable activities. Why the government's not? I mean, they've even been subsidising them more than than ever before, the fossil fuel industry. So, I mean, they're going the wrong way, aren't they? Why are they not biting the bullet on this, the nations? Are they terrified of the fossil fuel companies?
That's a really good question. Yes, fossil fuel subsidies must end. This taxation must come into place. And as I said, it depends on a national action. So if they really want to show the leadership, to show the finance and the commitment they put in Santa Marta, they should be implementing those now.
Right.
If they want to provide that finance for other areas of climate or loss and damage or adaptation that we need for COP31 and beyond, we need that public finance. It's not all any kind of taxation. It's specific on profits of those fossil fuel companies that are really reaching billions and billions.
Yeah. Okay, right. There's two quick wins so far.
Three ideas. So Mariana mentioned cost of capital. The biggest issue is going to be about the rollout, particularly of grids, is they're very expensive, cost of capital. Central banks are very influential in terms of interest rates. And I think one of the things which really caused a stir in Santa Marta was when we had Dr. Ma Jun, former chief economist of the Central Bank of China, describing how in China, if you're a developer of transition-relevant projects like grids, whatever, you can have a refinancing window in China of 1.5% or 1.25%. It's just come down to. So it's a bargain, and developers will go through the process of all the developments and so on. So is there a role the Santa Marta group of countries can really focus on? Can we learn from China and also Japan, which have different ways of having specific and preferential interest rates for transition, for TAF relevant, transition away from fossil relevant projects? So that's the first one. Here in London, we are gathering with Triodos Bank, a Dutch bank, leading Dutch bank.
Excellent. Part of the Global Alliance, Banking on Values.
Banking on Values, exactly right. So we're gathering with Colombia and the Netherlands and also other states, some of the private sector. So we talked about the importance of public finance. But we do need to have investors and banks and DFIs there to say, what is their role? Because they were missing in Santa Marta. The next meeting, they've got to be there and they've got to take leadership about how they're going to provide finance to meet the goal. And then the third idea is something I've been thinking about here in London, because we have bringing together lots of very smart people thinking about climate finance and climate strategy at the moment of a climate crisis in the UK, because we have a heat. So my suggestion is that we introduce countries can introduce a heat fall tax. So every time that the temperature rises above a certain level, I would say 30 degrees Celsius, you have an automatic tax on the shareholdings and bond holdings of investors in fossil fuel companies. Because I'm having been an investor, fossil fuel companies are set up primarily to benefit shareholders. So we need to internalize that externality and give an incentive for people to move away, reallocate their portfolios. And that would provide a fund which 50% could be invested internally for transition away from fossil fuels and also
adaptation,
and 50% is concessional finance, including of solidarity level. So that's my heat fall tax.
I like the idea.
It's invented here in London, and I hope that Oxfam could support it, as well as E3G and our friend over there.
Oh, and over to you, Lalsi. Yeah.
It's so hard to sort of sum it up into a couple of wins. I think really focusing on country-led transitions, and that's through a combination of existing architectures using mechanisms like the country platforms to bring in sort of local investment, really think about what is going to work for this specific country. I think it's looking at the existing architecture that already exists across the multilateral ecosystem. We didn't touch on things like the Global Clean Power Alliance finance mission and how that's able to sort of bring together countries, multilateral development banks, export credit agencies to really look at innovative new ways to crowd and provide greater sources of finance, particularly for emerging and developing economies. And then I think also looking outside the box as to how do we crowd in private capital? How do we source it? As you said, things like grids, things like electrification are very expensive upfront capital costs. Now that those costs are absolutely reducing, but it is a different way of financing infrastructure, and there's a lot of upfront capital. So how do we source in the private sector by making projects more bankable, by reducing risk levels, and by thinking about reform through MDBs, bringing together the sort of ecosystem to crowd that private investment where needed in the regions where it will have the most amount of impact. We yesterday at the Global Energy Transition Electrification Summit, we heard from President Whips of Palau, and he was talking about one of his goals for the Pacific Island Forum is for the Pacific to be the first 100% renewables region. And that's because for most Pacific countries, about 10% of their GDP is spent on imported fossil fuels. And so if we're able to support regions like that and then extrapolate those messages to other parts of the world to sort of transition infrastructure, which then has knock-on effects to creating greater energy security, energy sovereignty, energy access, there are so many development gains that can be created from that move from transitioning away to fossil fuels into cleaner futures.
Right, I've got people giving me dirty looks here right now because we're running over time, and there's like a whole afternoon of back-to-back shows. We will send this recording, which will be out tomorrow, but we'll send it to the Dutch and the Colombians so they can see what you said, something they can watch down whilst they're having their egg on toast in the morning or something like that. And but no, I mean, good on the nature side, good on taxing the profits, good on some sort of heat windfall tax, which sounds on the shareholders or whatever, so they bear the burden of that, and that'll make them change their minds quickly. And obviously key grids, I mean, that's absolutely good. And also investment packages for mini grids that you can put together so you've got something that attracts investors but actually helps people in smaller communities. I mean, it's endless, but these are quick wins for the Santa Marta initiative or process, whatever we're going to call it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have another wonderful guest with us here at London Climate Action Week 2026 in the heart of London. We're here with Sustainable Ventures. They have given us their part of their home, so we can actually do our studio here. So thank you very much indeed for that. Let me turn to Elizabeth Sturken or Sturken?
Sturken.
Sturken, it's Sturken, isn't it? Exactly. Who's the Vice President, Net Zero Ambition and Action at the Environmental Defense Fund in the United States of America. So welcome to We Don't Have Time TV.
I'm thrilled to be here, Nick, on this record-breaking heat in Europe. It's like Mother Nature's reminding us we need to act on climate now.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Exactly. I think that's absolutely true. And I think we can ask the people of London right now, and I think we're going to see this heat wave shifting towards Germany. My girlfriend lives in Germany. I live in Berlin. She's ready for the weekend where they're looking at 40, 41, so centigrade temperatures. It's really quite shocking. We know governments are really important in the story of climate action and stepped up climate action. But we also know there are other sectors of the economy that are absolutely, or other sectors of society that are really important. And we're going to talk a bit about the private sector and supply chains. Elizabeth, you're an expert in this. And you also work specifically with something called EDF Plus Business, Environmental Defense Fund Plus Business, which engages with the private sector. Firstly, just for those that don't know, what is the Environmental Defense Fund?
So EDF is one of the world's largest environmental groups, and we bring our unique expertise, science, markets, business expertise, to unlikely partners to try and drive action on climate now to benefit people on the planet, really addressing and incentivizing action on the most urgent issues.
So you're working specifically on something called EDF Plus Business, which sounds very intriguing. Can you tell the viewers about what that is?
Yes, well, the private sector is really critical for climate action. Governments can only do so much, as we can see in the United States right now. Supply chains are producing 50% of emissions, and so getting companies to act is really important. And there's a few ways to do that. The first is demand signals from companies. They're some of the most powerful levers. They can drive the change directly through their supply chains. So how do we cut emissions? We think about it this way, Nick. Think about a Venn diagram where you have emissions and you have leverage. Where is the business case strongest and where can business influence the most? Zeroing in there is where we need to act.
Very interesting. And I mean, these are complex, these supply chains are complex things, right? They whip all around the world, but they're also themselves vulnerable to climate change. So there's a kind of win-win with this if we can actually deal with climate change through business and supply chains. I mean, what would you describe as the level of enthusiasm and commitment to climate in the private sector at the moment? I mean, whether through supply chains or through domestically their own actions, is the private sector still on board with this topic?
Well, you might have heard a lot about green hushing, where companies are not speaking about what they're doing, but the data show they are still acting. Why are they doing that? Because it's good for business. And, you know, renewable energy, I think, is a great example. I mean, there you had private sector, public sector, global investment. The private sector catalyzed investment, innovation, drove demand, reduced the cost of production, and really renewables are now cheaper, right, than fossil fuels. So I think that what we're seeing with companies is that they are continuing the sustainability work, but speaking about it less. The challenge really now is, how do we go faster? How do we scale? And what does that look like? The good news is there's been some recent standards on the voluntary side that are going to help clarify how to act for business. The ISO Net Zero Standard, the Science Based Targets Initiative Net Zero Standard, and those they're showing that companies are still acting. Over 13,000 companies have set a net zero target. And for the first time, those standards, I think, will clarify things and make acting make it clear what companies need to do. And I guess the one other thing I would point out is a piece of work that EDF just put out, EDF Plus Business, my team and I, that I think represents the best thinking, if I may say so, on what companies need to do now. It's years of trying to figure out, how do we act, what makes sense, and really it's about baking it in the business, driving it deep, having the business own it. Companies are not going to do this, right? We're not going to decarbonize unless this makes sense. And from a business perspective, that is really what will drive the whole scale change that we need, the decarbonization at scale.
And the studies you've been doing, are these predominantly United States of America companies, or does it stretch beyond that to Europe? Or
well, the truth is that if it were only United States, you know, it would be an interesting case study. We're seeing some of the quietest yet strongest action actually in the United States. But the truth is, many companies are global. You have EU and its regulations, and that is pulling demand for products that have lower climate impact. For example, the EU methane regulations, right? Really important. So those policy demand signals help. The cost savings, the return on investment, all of those things are really quietly driving a lot of action. It's not enough. We need to scale. And that's where companies need to lean in, right? Leverage their supply chains, ask their companies to decarbonize along with them.
Absolutely. And I mean, these global companies are potentially so important because their footprints in, say, Asia or Africa or Latin America, etc., where maybe, you know, things are a little bit maybe behind in large numbers of cases than that's happening in the United States or Europe, but they want to be a part of this story,
and sometimes they're leapfrogging, right? The innovation is leapfrogging, right?
That's
and
true.
They're seeing the value of market mechanisms and high integrity carbon credits, and really investing in nature. So it's
yes, you're absolutely right. It's not. There are examples in the developing world that they're doing actually better than the developed world. That's absolutely true. And but I mean, the big global corporations. I mean, if they, it seems inconsistent sometimes that they would do, say, so much renewable energy in the United States, but less in another place where, in fact, it could be even cheaper to install it. It's just that the policies aren't quite as strongly in favor of it. And so I think some companies do actually go above and beyond the government policy because they want to be ahead of the game as well. So it's a very interesting and curious landscape, and very important in terms of understanding how the private sector operates and thinks. And seeing those front runners is cool because they're the ones that can also lift the other ones up.
And those front runners have supply chains across the globe.
Yeah,
they can work with those partners, engage with developing countries to try and drive the policies and do the hard work on the ground to get things moving. So they have the capital, they have the goals, and to meet those goals, they're going to have to do that.
Yeah. So we were mentioning before on the previous show about this Santa Marta conference in Colombia, which was hosted by the Netherlands and the Colombian government. Two very formidable women from the Netherlands and Colombia, environment ministers, and they're actually here at London Climate Action Week as well. I bumped into them last night and had a chat with them, and they produced a report about what happened in Santa Marta, which was all about kickstarting, in this case, just under 60 countries who want to exit from fossil fuels, countries like the UK, Germany, through to the small islands in the Pacific, through to Angola, Nigeria, you name it, Uruguay. It was really a very positive atmosphere. And one thing that also came up in these Santa Marta discussions just over a month ago was the issue of the super pollutants and the issue of methane, which you just mentioned before. And they see that group of nations, and I think there are more going to be joining them as the coalition of the doing, as they like to call it, to exit from fossil fuels. They will be also looking at these quick wins that they need to make. And they see quick wins in different places, but also in the super pollutants and methane. This would seem to be a sensible decision if you need quick wins on climate action. And so tell us why, Elizabeth. Why is methane so cool in terms of quick action?
Well, I would say, Nick, if you want to do two things that will have the most impact on making our trajectory to net zero smoother and getting us to a stable climate the fastest, it's number one, acting on short-lived climate pollutants like methane, and number two, stopping deforestation. So methane, the science around that shows it's just a super powerful climate gas, right? And if we reduce it, it becomes like an emergency brake on stopping climate change and getting us to a more stable climate. And what we're finding also is it's one of the most underfunded opportunities for investment. And so because of that, because of the quick win, it's not going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it is really the opportunity that we all need to be leaning in on right now.
And EDF has done a lot of work on this, haven't you?
That's right,
and
yes.
You've been behind satellites as well, spotting methane plumes coming from different parts of the world. So great work that EDF has been doing. And it's interesting to note that one of my colleagues right now is actually heading or is already at a reception hosted by King Charles III, which specifically on the card says to a non-CO2 pollutant methane event, right? I mean, that's got to be so cool that the king is actually.
I love that the king is still showing up for environmental events and leaning in, right? And leaning in on one of the most important issues. Yes, EDF has been focusing on oil and gas emissions from methane emissions from oil and gas and also from agriculture. These are two areas that we feel like can really make a big difference. On the private sector side, we are part of something called the Beyond Alliance, and we're doing a few things. We are helping to launch the Super Pollutant Action Initiative, which is a corporate coalition of a number of companies like Google, Amazon, Chase, Salesforce, working together through procurement, capital, and partnerships to really use carbon credits and to enable high impact super pollutant mitigation. So that, along with a super pollutant academy to educate folks about this, and a roadmap to try and figure out what are the highest impact things to do first. It's really about enabling private sector action and getting that funding there faster. So hitting it from all angles. I mentioned the government regulations, corporate action, individual action. It all adds up.
Good. Well, thank you very much indeed for being with us on We Don't Have Time here at London Climate Action Week. And hope to see you again, maybe here next year or at the COP or somewhere else.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So another lovely guest with us here at London Climate Action Week, here in the heart of the capital of the United Kingdom, London. We've got a guest here. We're going to talk about the issues of flooding in the UK, which can be also symbolic and I suppose emblematic of challenges that face many, many countries across the world in different ways, but all have the extreme weather events now hitting their countries, and therefore they need to think about how they handle this. So let me introduce Julie Foley. You're the Director of Flood Risk Strategy and Adaptation at the Environment Agency here in the UK. Firstly, for viewers who might be in different countries around the world, what does the Environment Agency do?
Yeah, so the Environment Agency is the biggest public body responsible for flood and water management for England.
Right, okay. Tell us a little bit about this current situation in the UK. Is it facing more flooding than before? What's going on?
Yeah, for sure. I've worked in flood risk management for about 20 years, and in my time working in the Environment Agency with working many local partners, we've been seeing both the frequency and the severity of flooding getting worse every year, and the impacts on communities getting more and more challenging. What we know from our own work is that there are 6.3 million properties in areas at flood risk across England, and that's flooding from, say, rivers overtopping, from storm surges from the sea, but increasingly from surface water flooding in urban cities, which is very topical to talking about issues with London Climate Week.
Yes. So, I mean, you've been at the Smarter Cities conference here today in County Hall, and you were obviously talking about this issue of flooding. Did you find that it resonated with the audience there, that they're aware of it, but they want to know what to do about it?
Yes, it definitely did. I think on a day where we've had extreme weather warnings here in London about heat, we've actually also simultaneously had the Met Office here actually issuing warnings for thunderstorms and surface water flooding. So it was really coming to the fore for most of the participants here about the challenges of having too much water and too little water at times, and the fact that you kind of need integrated solutions to flood and water management.
Yes. Because, I mean, I live in Berlin, but I do listen to the BBC sometimes in the mornings. And I think the earlier part of this year, in parts of the United Kingdom anyway, floods were a big part of that feature.
Every year it is actually. So nearly every winter, autumn, we tend to have successive named storms. But what we are seeing is the importance of sustained investment. So, very sadly, we see properties and people flooded, and that is completely devastating. But what we're also seeing is a dividend from what has been decades of investment in flood defences and maintaining those flood defences. And I guess we've traditionally always talked about, iconic barriers like the Thames Barrier here in London, which of course everybody would know and recognise. But flood risk management isn't just about kind of grey infrastructure. It's also about nature-based solutions increasingly. And in the session I was just in, everybody was talking about the need for more nature-based solutions, even in compact urban spaces like London and other cities.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Because people forget things like, the urban setting. Or we had somebody on from Natural England, the head of Natural England, on the show yesterday, talking about how actually, ironically, in England particularly, gardens play a big role in biodiversity, but also in absorbing carbon, right?
Yeah.
So, and presumably, you can manage even gardens in a way that maybe might reduce flooding in some respect.
Well, a really big problem in urban spaces is the sort of concreting over of spaces. So it's actually people removing their gardens and concreting it over the impermeable surfaces. And actually part of the efforts to manage sustainable drainage better is actually to put blue-green solutions back in to our urban environment. So this sort of mimics natural drainage and helps to avoid this very dangerous surface water runoff. That was a really big deal for us in London. We had the Deputy Mayor speaking in our session, and he talked about the really devastating flooding that happened in London with surface water flooding in 2021.
Right, yes.
Thousands of people were affected. Underground stations stopped working. They were flooded. Hospitals were impacted. Infrastructure was impacted. And we were just talking about, the implications for the economy much more broadly when you have surface water flooding. But actually, some of the solutions here in London are going to be about rainwater gardens, more permeable surfaces to try and capture that runoff as quickly as possible to just try and mitigate the impacts of surface water flooding, which can be so dangerous to people's lives.
Yes, economically also expensive as well. And I mean, if you're flooding the London Underground, I mean, fixing that, it's not 5 shillings and sixpence, is it?
No, it's a
big cost,
huge economic impact. So when we talk about flood and climate resilience, we're talking about economic resilience for cities like London. And it's been great to see the mayor and the deputy mayor actually show such leadership, working with like the Environment Agency and others to ensure that we are flood ready in London. We've actually generated a sort of communications branding called Flood Ready London. And that's about getting across this message, particularly to Londoners and citizens, about the importance of being flood aware.
Right.
So that they think about that more in their everyday lives.
Right. I was here in London last November because we'd been broadcasting from the climate conference which took place in Belém in Brazil, and then we came straight here because we wanted to catch up with this thing called this National Emergency Briefing on climate and biodiversity. Maybe it was biodiversity and climate. And I caught up with a guy from Oxford Martin University called Professor Paul Burns, and he was talking about how do you, in a sense, almost climate-proof the UK against extreme weather events now and going forward? And he seemed to, based on his research, say we need actually to set aside an area of land the size of Scotland. I don't know how big that is in terms of the size of England, but to actually act to be able to soak up carbon, but also soak up the water.
Store floodwaters,
yes. And that means changes in agricultural practice and other things like that. So I mean, your research and what you're doing, the work that you do, you probably see these longer plans possibly about how we deal with this. So gardens is good and blah, 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 but there's also the kind of mega decisions, I suppose you might say.
And that's a really good point. So there's some tactical points about just not paving over your gardens in cities, but actually strategically for policymakers, we need to be putting our planning on a decadal footing. So we need to be looking out to 2100 and beyond. So what we also know is that by the 2050s, 1 in 4 properties in England will be at flood risk. That is becoming a much more mainstream societal issue, and it's going to require very different ways of thinking about planning, about investments, about the way in which we use our land and our spaces. And that might include, for example, the kind of storage solutions that you were talking about in terms of nature-based solutions, and just thinking about some of our planning choices in a much more flood and climate resilient way.
And when you say 1 in 4 could be at risk going forward, where are we right now? Are we at 1 in 10 or 1 in 20?
We're broadly about 1 in 6.
1 in 6, right.
So we already have a lot of people at flood risk, increasingly from surface water flooding. That's a growing area of risk. But yes, by the 2050s, it'll be 1 in 4 properties And the 2050s is not very far away.
No, it's not. That's the whole thing. It's actually around the corner for a lot of people.
Yes.
I mean, it might not be around my corner, but it's around the corner for a large number of people living in Britain. Lastly, just last thing, I saw that the UK Climate Change Committee in May had a report out, which was phrased in a designed, I think, to actually make people really think about things. So it talked about the British way of life being under threat from, heat and flooding. And I think with flooding, it seemed to indicate that we needed an extra, in the UK, was it 1.6 billion a year, maybe? And okay, everyone goes around going, "Oh my God, more money to spend on this," right? But it also equally pointed out that actually that would save tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions.
Yeah, so I saw that. That was a really welcome piece of work that the Climate Change Committee did, and they really, I think, demonstrated why it's so important to put climate adaptation at the heart of our kind of investment thinking. Here in England, the government has made a commitment for £7.9 billion to go into sustained flood and project investments for the next 10 years. So that's really positive because it will transcend parliaments, which is good news. But that sustained investment is going to be incredibly important. Just to give you a stat that makes your point really well, we know that for every £1 we invest in flood risk management, we get at the very least £5 in return. From avoiding flood damages.
Right.
So that just shows that investing in flood risk management is actually really, really good value for money in terms of return on government investment.
Absolutely. And also, I was just reflecting now on what that program we did came out yesterday, which was with English Nature, was also with reserves. Basically nature reserves, linking them up, not just for biodiversity, but for managing against, the extreme weather, making sure that you have the right kind of trees in these nature reserves. And these are some of the big ones, right? The ones running right through Kent and the Weald, and so that they can still do their job in the future of taking water and drilling it into the ground, which is what trees do. So, I mean, there's so much to say about this, but it's a fascinating, it should be actually exciting to think how we can reimagine the landscapes of England and the United Kingdom to deal with these challenges, and so we can all still live here quite happily into the 21st century, 22nd century.
And we don't often think about flood risk management and nature recovery being actually part of the same solution for us. But they absolutely will be, and they will need to be actually if we're going to have more climate resilient places.
Good. Thank you very much for being on We Don't Have Time TV.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Best of luck with your work.
Thank you.
So, we've got some other wonderful guests with us here at London Climate Action Week 2026. And we are in the wonderful premises of Sustainable Ventures, who have lent us some space for our studios. So this is our home for this week in London, in the capital of the United Kingdom. When we think about the drivers of climate change, we can divide them up into two major categories: energy and food. Our food systems contribute to global warming in a wide range of ways, from the fertilizers that we put on the crops to the distances we transport products, and to the methane, of course, released from landfills when food is wasted and thrown away. But what's more is that food is obviously crucial to human life, and any reforms we make on our food systems must take care not to compromise food access for communities. To help us navigate what is an absolutely huge topic, which we can never cover all the bases on, but we can look and glimpse to new ideas, I think, on how we actually deal with the food story. I've got Max Boucher, Head of Nature Programs at FAIRR, and we can ask what that is in a second. We've got Marnie Hewitt, who's Program Manager, Alternative Proteins Association. Very interesting topic. And Whitney Strauss, who's Project Lead at the Dallas County Food Plan. Great, and I think that's probably going to be talking about almost interacting directly with real people. Yeah, okay. Max, let's begin with you. you work for FAIR, and it's here in my script. That's the Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return Initiative. It's a bit of a mouthful, but we're going to unpick it a bit. What's it all about?
So fundamentally, FAIR is a recognition that the global food system, and especially when it comes to livestock production, is extraordinarily complex, and that investors in the financial sector is not particularly well prepared to integrate that complexity to how it approaches its investments. So what we do is to help them really understand the unique risks, the unique opportunities that are a result of a changing climate and changing environment, so that they can make better investment decisions, but also that they can engage more meaningfully with the companies in which they already are shareholders or lenders for.
So can you give us a kind of more concrete example of that? So you're helping investors, is that correct? Investing in animal livestock forms of farming. What do the investors need to know, and what do they, in a sense, need to do to make this more sustainable in the face of climate change, for example?
Yeah, so there's a few things to that. The first one is to recognize that on a long enough basis, these things are financially material. So things like climate change, deforestation, pollution, water use, that these things will matter to the companies operating in the livestock sector, and that as investors, obviously, you depend on the returns on your investment. So that's the first thing. The second thing is understanding that there are solutions. There are solutions in terms of mitigating some of those risks, mitigating some of the impacts of the industry on the planet, but also for the industry to become more resilient. And there's also opportunities in terms of transforming how some of these industries actually produce food or what they produce. And those opportunities often are still at a very venture capital stage, and the bigger investment manager, pension funds, and so on are not necessarily aware of these opportunities.
Right. So we're at a very interesting moment, you might be saying, in this whole story of animal livestock farming, the challenges that it's going to face going forward, but also the contribution it could make if investors are savvy enough to actually reduce the risks of climate change from this large sector. So maybe we can pause on that and hold that idea for a second. You're also into salmon farming, right? So FAIR is also into salmon farming, which is a topic I think many people don't really understand fisheries in terms of farming. They just see the product in the supermarket or whatever, but they don't realize there's a huge complexity behind this. It's not just putting fish in nice little cages in the ocean and then they grow and then you harvest them and that's it. There's a whole sustainability story behind fish farming, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the main thing to understand is that the fact that fish, salmon in this case, are directly in the water, and that marine ecosystems are responding in a very different way to climate change and changes in water temperatures than land-based systems do, creates, again, sort of unique risks for this production. So one thing is that they are very susceptible to pests, disease. They can get attacked by these so-called sea lice that live in the water and attach themselves and start chewing the flesh of the salmon, which doesn't look great when you're trying to sell it as a kind of premium product in a supermarket. You have string jellyfish and so on, and they tend to get diseases. And you also have to treat them directly in the water. So that means that you're pumping antibiotics, pesticides directly in the water. You don't have the kind of treatment facilities that you might have in a land-based system. So that adds, again, to the complexity of that operation. So there's always a big risk to the production that comes from disease, mortalities, and just loss of production. And the other thing is that people are not often aware that salmon is actually a carnivorous fish. It eats other fish. So that means that we go out fishing to produce fish feed that we then feed to salmon. And those fish stocks vary a lot over time. And this year is going to be a strong El Nino phenomenon, which actually has a really high negative impact with one of the key fisheries that produces that feed, which is in Peru, willow anchovies, which Peru has already announced that they will very likely cancel the fishing season for that. So you're going to see those prices spike, and that will be ultimately transferred to consumers. So you're going to be directly affected as a consumer by those dependencies.
So what you're doing is you're portraying the complexities of fish farming. It's not as simple as it looks, and the kind of inputs that are needed, health, antibiotics, other things like that to keep it going. And on top of that complexity, you've now got the complexity of climate change, because of rising sea temperatures in many ways, that could, in a sense, make it even more challenging and maybe expensive to actually produce fish this way. And they need to think about how they're going to deal with these challenges going forward. Yeah.
And there are opportunities as with every problem, right? So there are solutions that are appearing in terms of innovation that will mitigate some of these risks. You can innovate and integrate things like algal oils or insect meal to your feed to replace some of that fish component. But there's also alternatives. So increasingly, we're looking at unfed species that can be farmed either as a replacement. So you're talking about mussels, oysters, seaweed, but also to be integrated as feed ingredients as well, or be grown around the salmon farms to mitigate some of the pollution that happens there.
Okay, I think we're getting a lot on this right now, and I wanted to come back on it, but I'm always worried about mussels being taken by these salmon, because I like mussels, and I don't want the salmon having them all. So, let's see what we do about that. Marnie, what seems to be the thread here is proteins, by the way. I've just suddenly realized, which is a bit dumb of me. I should have realized before. But you're in the area of alternative proteins. Now, why is this is such a fascinating area, and is it stuff that's more startup, or are we already in the full flush of alternative proteins for food coming into the system?
Well, I work for the Alternative Proteins Association, and we represent, predominantly, we have businesses that are in the startup phase, but it is something that multinationals are also looking into, and they've made investments into their own alternative protein capabilities, because I think there is this increasing need to have secure supply chains. So we know that multinationals like Mondelez International, Nestle, they've been looking into developing their own technologies or partnerships with startups that are working on precision fermentation, so precision fermented dairy or egg proteins, these sorts of things.
So why would we need to do this? Why do we need alternative proteins, and what's the link with climate change?
Well, alternative proteins are kind of a one pillar of a functioning and sustainable global food system. They can offer a solution that uses a lot less land. So they're categorized in three ways. We've got plant-based protein, but then we've also got our novel foods. So you've got fermentation technologies and cell-cultivated products. And so what we can do is we can grow these proteins without the animals, meaning that we have a much more secure supply chain.
So we're talking about meat-type products, which are grown from meat cells.
Yeah.
And then fermented and whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
So some people can be very nervous when they hear that, right? And presumably there are government standards to make sure that we're not eating something that's bad for us, right?
Yeah.
But then there's other forms of proteins, right? I mean, for example, I love vegetarian sausages, which I eat in Germany, but they're made from pea proteins, and also whey, I think, from and then something called zeitan, which is a noodle-based, I think, protein from Asia. And then there's tofu, of course. Tofu is another alternative, right? That's another form of protein, right?
Yeah.
So different kinds of alternative protein.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're talking about some of the plant-based ones there, and then you've got categories, the fermentation and cell-cultivated products, which often fall under this umbrella of novel foods in Europe, and this is a form of regulation. So we have a few hurdles for getting these products to market at the moment, because we have a very rigorous safety assessment in Europe called novel foods, and so some of those more advanced technologies fall under that umbrella.
Right. I'm going to come back to you on this. Whitney, your organization, the Dallas County Food Plan, is trying to reform the food system at a local level where you live in Texas. And what these two people are talking about maybe seem a bit remote from maybe what's going on with what you're doing. But in fact, food is this chain, isn't it? This massive chain of choices, in a sense, of who gets what food and whether it's good quality food, which is another big issue as well. Tell us a little bit about your work.
Yes, so I lead the Dallas County Food Plan Collaborative, which is now, we are made up of more than 450 organizations working on a plan to have our local food system in Dallas be resilient and sustainable and healthy and accessible for all the residents that live in the city of Dallas and also Dallas County and eventually all of North Texas. So just for just to frame it, Dallas County has 2.6 million people that live there. We are in the northern part of Texas. So we're joining a lot of other cities across the U.S. and actually across the globe that have begun a plan and to implement a plan, not just a food policy council, but an actual plan for how do we want to have more control and to see the resiliency of our local food, because we're importing so much, we're seeing food waste, and also just issues that come up with what you said with accessibility to healthy food, depending on your income level. So how are we mapping all of that at a local level, and what can we control, and then having that collaboration to have solutions. So it's exciting to see it. We're the second food plan in Texas. So Austin created theirs first, which is the southern part of Texas, and then now us. And we're seeing this movement now grow across not only our state, but across the U.S. as well, as more cities want to include food system planning into their infrastructure growth for the economic opportunity, for healthy food, and for health outcomes.
Because health is probably the thing that unites us all in a sense when we look at food, right? Because I think some of us feel, and from what we've read and things like that, that some of the food that we've been fed since the Second World War hasn't necessarily been actually the best food for our health, you know, in terms of levels of obesity and other things like type 2 diabetes and whatever. So, and then on top of this now, I mean, there seem to be about volume production, but then a lot of people now are talking about maybe we could all eat more high quality food, but maybe less of it, as it were. So, I mean, there's these kind of debates sort of circle around, don't they? Does this, I mean, salmon's another good point, right? Because as a kid, right, I remember salmon like something we had at home once a year, right? And now it's as cheap as chicken. It's sometimes cheaper than chicken, right? What are we actually trying to create with our food systems? Is that a deep philosophical question? I understand what you're trying to do with proteins, which is to say we can produce proteins that people need with less land. And this may be something that we need to do because of climate change, right? And is that the driving force?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can help to maintain supply chains that already exist with alternative proteins, but also, you know, some of the companies that I work with, they've got really exciting opportunities. You know, they can alter the saturated fat profile of cultivated meat to make it a healthier alternative. I mean, this is a major concern for people, the saturated fat profile of meat. So that's something that we can potentially work on in alternative proteins. But as I say, you know, it's one solution, it's one pillar, it's not a silver bullet. It's as part of a wider food systems transformation that I think everyone here today is working very hard on.
Yes, I suppose it's like, what is the raison d'etre of something? So on one level, it's maybe you can grow the same level of protein on a fraction of the land. That might be good for the environment and with dealing with climate change. Plus, you can create foods that taste and look like the stuff that everybody knows, but it's got less fat in it for some reason.
Yeah, well, also, I mean, look, egg protein and milk protein, they are extremely functional proteins. So in the bakery aisle or in other areas of the food industry, they have really great functionality, but because of supply chain shocks, things like bird flu outbreaks and things like this, it means that those supply chains are no longer as secure and they're going to become increasingly insecure.
Right.
So we need alternative proteins as a pillar to prop up those supply chains for when those shocks do happen.
Okay, so I can get that, right? So with climate change, long supply chains at risk, you never know. But even short supply chains can be at risk, right? Because we know that some of the big flooding that happens in the West Country of England, now far too regularly, mean that certain foods can't even get out of Cornwall or Devon to the markets in time before they're rotting, right? I was talking to a farmer about this some time ago. So it's short and long supply chains. So I can get that as well. How with the livestock story, what do you think you're trying to achieve with this? What's the ultimate goal? What would be considered a good outcome of your work, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the kind of thing that I'm going to be able to resolve by myself, but the ultimate goal is to have a food system that provides for everyone healthy diets within planetary boundaries.
Right. Okay. So it is about health and it is about the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do investors in livestock really understand that livestock can be both a force for good or a force for bad in terms of the way that they're farmed or how they're fed and blah, blah, blah?
I mean, it's been a long journey, right? We've existed for 10 years and trying to create this education for investors about the state of livestock and exactly as you said, how it can be both a problem and a solution. And that acknowledgement is starting to gain traction, especially with the long-term looking investors. If you're talking about a pension fund or an insurance companies, often they'll say, I'm looking at the next 75, 100 years. So I need to make sure
all these centers is still fossil fuel based. Now, Anna Hall, your sector deals with the heat that things generate, and data centers are generating a lot of heat, are they not? What can be done with that heat?
So I think data center is a very important part of the equation because we're in this
resilience for cities like London.
So it's short and long way that they're farmed or how they're fed and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, it's been a long journey, right? We've existed for 10 years and trying to create this education for investors about the state of livestock and exactly as you said, how it can be both a problem and a solution. And that acknowledgement is starting to gain traction, especially with the long-term looking investors. If you're talking about a pension fund or an insurance companies, often they'll say, I'm looking at the next 75, 100 years. So I need to make sure that these things live within planetary boundaries because I need my investments to be resilient over that long-term period. So that education is really kind of coming a little bit to fruition, I think, in the last few years.
And do the farmers come into your story as well, or is it just the investors?
Yeah, we speak to farmers a lot, and we actually do a lot of matching investors and farmers so they can learn from each other and understand a little bit each other's views on these things. And obviously, farmers there's about 1 billion of them, and they have incredibly diversified or diverse views. But in general, we hear that farmers are all on board to do better, and they love concepts like regenerative agriculture and new techniques that embrace more nature, basically, on the farm, which also provides better quality food. So there's actually some evidence that regeneratively grown food is more nutritious for the same amount of carrots or potatoes.
Yes. How within this food system in Texas County, right? What's the greatest need for reform? Why are you trying to do this plan? Why are you trying to create these reforms?
I think there's several. Actually, there's themes that came up from regenerative agriculture, how we are preserving our land for regenerative agriculture and farming to see that continue. So a few things, we talk about climate. I mean, I don't know if you know, but Texas froze in 2021.
Yeah.
We had a major freeze, which shut down the entire state. That was a part of the city of Austin's motivation for their food plan, realizing we must have more control over what's happening in our local food because the short supply chain or long supply chain, we're importing 98% of what we eat to these major cities in Texas. And oh my gosh, we nearly ran out of food in 4 days. So we're a little behind that. So it is the resiliency. But I think the major issue is the accessibility of healthy food. So which means the affordability, where it is geographically, depending on where you live. So that is a major driver of our work in Dallas. It's economic opportunity as well. It's the importance of the environmental sustainability. But really, when we look at the percentage of households that are food insecure in our city, we are one of the highest ranking in the U.S. And it is increased. It's just getting worse. So with that also comes a negative health outcome. So you're seeing the rise in diabetes, you're seeing the rise in hypertension, and chronic diseases that are related to your diet. And if we want to improve our health, if we want to improve that, we have to improve the accessibility of affordable, healthy food to where you live. So that's one of the key components of what we're solving for, is having those opportunities, particularly in the southern part of our county, where we see large swaths of land that are food deserts that have nothing there. So solving for that in a way to make it economically stable too.
I once had this guy on the show who was doing something it was in California. He was actually a fashion designer, but he was a Black American, and he tried and giving something back to his own community. And he decided that all this concrete car parks that weren't used anymore in some of the poorer parts of California, this would be great if you just dug them all up and started planting fresh food, so people actually could go and pick it. Because you're right, there are parts of the US where you could drive, 25 minutes, you're not going to see a fresh apple in a shop. I mean, it's really quite staggering. And he started digging it all up, and then he got in trouble with the law, because basically you're not allowed to sort of create gardens by digging up the concrete. And then
you're talking about Ron Finley, the gangster gardener.
The gangster gardener, He was absolutely great. But he became so popular, it became also a community building thing as well, right? Where young kids and things would suddenly start learning how things grow. And that was a great story. That was a great story, I mean, livestock. I always think, when I think of the States, I always think of livestock, and that's almost, it seems in America, an untouchable industry. If you try to touch it and say maybe it's not structured to maximize health or land use, or imported soya beans from deforested Amazon, and you know what I mean. You almost can't touch it. It's very American. We love it. Nobody can say anything. Is that?
Well, and then you're talking about Texas, where we have beef, lots of beef,
I know.
And ranchers.
I know.
So
Is it difficult sometimes to get people to see that?
I straddle a lot of lines in this work.
Is needed, yeah.
But no, actually, the common thread is we need to have more sustainable methods for all of our farming, including ranching. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to have the healthiest product that we can have, in addition to the sustainability of it. So finding the common language and having people engage in that versus what's right or what's wrong, that's where we've had success. So I am happy to say that in Dallas, but also we've been talking to other parts of Texas, primarily like the Panhandle region, which has a lot of ranching and cattle production and that. There's a deep interest in this work and wanting to see change because of a lot of the issues that we've had come up. So, and again, kind of sticking to what we've been talking about in Dallas and really throughout, is everyone wants accessible, healthy food, and they want to see that it's produced locally, because they see the benefit in the economics of that. It's healthier, it's higher quality. So yes, beef is a huge industry and provides a lot of economic opportunity in Texas and beyond. And we definitely like our steakhouses there. But if you go back to what do we all have in common? And we all want healthy food, and we want it grown in a sustainable way or produced in a sustainable way. Yeah.
The U.S. beef discussion is very interesting, right? Because beef prices in the U.S. have gone up, 65%, I think, in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And there's, US government initiatives and a lot of wordage saying we need to support more growth in that sector and bring back the herd size, which has shrunk considerably. And there seems to be in the rancher community, at least an acknowledgement that the land just can't carry more cows and that actually they'd rather do less but better. And the regenerative agriculture is particularly popular with ranchers in the US. They really kind of believe that they can do better, but often that means having fewer cows in the same piece of land.
So we did a series a couple of years ago with Unilever on regenerative agriculture. Unilever, as we all know, one of the biggest companies in the world, although not doing quite as much, I think, in food these days. But they, I talked to livestock farmers in, it wasn't in Texas, it was another county, it might have been Georgia, and they were all just singing the praises of just let the land lie a little bit fallow for 4 or 5 years, keep it calm, not too many inputs, and then you suddenly start seeing the grass coming back much better than before for the cattle. In other words, the soil is being repaired. And I think in Idaho or Iowa, Unilever paid the farmers, this was with soya beans, to de-risk switching from normal intensive agriculture to regenerative. They did it for 6 years, I think. Unilever paid these farmers growing these soybeans. And after that, the farmers went, holy shit, I don't need as many pesticides. I don't need as many fertilizers. I don't need all this. This is how it can work better for me. So there are so many different ways of looking at the food story, you know what I mean? But I like the idea that what you're talking about with food proteins and making them through fermentation process and other processes isn't just like, this is how it's all going to be. It's like, this is a part of the story.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think this is what people lose sight of when we have these discussions, right? People think you're trying to make the world all, fermented proteins. People, no, I don't want that. How can they force that on me? Just because of climate change, I don't care.
Yeah, and I'm very in favour of having more local solutions for our food system. But realistically, if we are going to feed 10 billion people on this planet and we're going to do it sustainably and we're going to help bring people out of famine, I mean, I think it's great that we have a global food system, to be honest with you. I don't think it's functioning how it should right now, but I think it's wonderful that we're bringing huge populations out of a hunger crisis. The thing is that we need to change what we're eating a little bit. We need to have less but better. I think more regenerative agriculture, more local farming, absolutely. But then we also need solutions like alternative proteins, which can bolster, larger parts of the supply chain to make sure that we are feeding everyone as healthily as possible and sustainably as possible and in a resilient way.
The connection here, of course, is a foundation, yes? I mean, tell us about this foundation, because I was just curious about it. The Collier Foundation?
Yeah, the Jeremy Collier Foundation.
Yeah.
So Jeremy Collier himself used to run a private equity fund called Collier Capital. And he always found that he himself, as an investor who cares about food systems, he never had the right information that he would think he needed to make good decisions when it came to investing in that sector. So he basically took it upon himself to create his foundation, which partly funds FAIR and partly funds the APA, as well as other activities in the food sector, which often tends to revolve around investors as well, because of his background. He believes in the power of investors to create change once they hold better information.
Yeah. And are you optimistic, either at the local level or at the level of nation state or at a global level, that we can transform the food systems? Because in the past it was just sometimes a big row between the big food companies, that had a vision of how to do things, more fertilizers, more pesticides, more this, blah, blah, blah. And then it was on the other side was the organic movement, which say, no, you can't do that. That's not the way forward. And everybody trying to find good examples all around the world that match their arguments to justify why one was better over the other. And then there seems to be some kind of coalescing in the middle here, that there's some middle ground, which is a bit broader, and that sort of everybody can play, and everybody's doing something a little bit different, not quite as damaging on this side, allowing regenerative agriculture to come in, which isn't sort of certified, but it's more instinctive. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Sorry. I think I mean, so I can speak from the UK perspective in that I'm really excited for what's coming forward. I mean, it's that kind of either or argument. We don't need it to be either or. We need all of these solutions to come together in different ways. But from an alternative proteins perspective, I'm really excited for the UK environment personally. I mean, the UK has invested more into alternative protein R&D than any other European country over the last 5 years, which is excellent. We also were the first country to pioneer a sandbox program called the Cell Cultivated Sandbox Program.
Sandbox program? What's
Yes.
a sandbox? It sounds like something the children would play with.
Yeah.
Sandbox?
I mean, it's kind of, I guess that's kind of the vision is that, you get the regulators and the businesses together. And also we have, educational institutes where as a trade association in the sandbox as well. And you get them talking to each other because the regulators and the businesses weren't talking to each other about these technologies before, and now they are. And the UK has really pioneered here, and they've done something very, very special that now other parts of the world want to copy us in. And they're seeing this sandbox program and they're saying, oh, hang on a minute. If regulators and businesses and educational institutions can learn from each other, then we can better regulate these products and we can create a better environment for alternative proteins to come to market faster in Europe.
And from your perspective with livestock and briefly, do you see changes coming in terms of maybe less quantity and more quality, if I can put it that way? And you see a future for salmon and also for livestock generally in the equation, but maybe a different pathway?
Absolutely. So I think the good thing of working with investors is that they never think of solutions as all or nothing. They think in terms of portfolios. And with food systems, there is a portfolio of solutions that need to come in together. It's not all alternative proteins, not all regenerative agriculture. We need a bit of both, as well as many other things, including fish and seafood. So they really think in that way. And that's the way that we also reflect on the challenges that we're facing and the progress that we're seeing. Is never a kind of big needle shift towards one solution. It's all of these things moving in parallel. And the other thing with investors is that they're very focused on directional progress rather than, again, an all or nothing finish line. So long as there is incremental progress towards what they think might be a sustainable outcome for food systems, that's a good outcome for them.
Okay. And your plan, it's operating, it's happening?
It's happening. Yeah.
Okay.
The final plan will be ready this fall, but because we did our plan differently, it's a public-private partnership and it's human-centered design. So we partnered with Southern Methodist University, the MADI program, which is Masters of Arts Design and Innovation, to do a human-centered approach. So because of that, we've been able to see opportunities as we're developing the plan. So we have been able to take advantage of opportunities and see proof of concept early, which will help as we implement. So, and I should say other cities, we're able to borrow from what they've seen too. So it's happening.
I imagine one of the good things about that in many ways is that it allows people to start thinking about where does my food come from, what's in it, and how do I ensure that, for myself and my family, but also for the next generation, this is going to be around.
Exactly. And why we're talking about it as a system approach versus, food waste or food insecurity or health outcomes, how it relates to all of us and for everyone to be engaged in the work.
Well, good. It's a complex topic and linking it all up, but I think we all did a reasonable job of getting there. And I hope you all have a good time at London Climate Action Week, because I think that really is something special now. It didn't used to be so big, but now it's absolutely huge. And that's a sign that people are interested in these topics. And that's important all on its own. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
So welcome to another show of We Don't Have Time. Here we are in London at London Climate Action Week 2026. And we're here at Sustainable Ventures in County Hall, just on the other side of the river from the House of Commons. So if you're tuning in from around the world, maybe you've got a little glimpse of where we are. So Right now, we're turning our attention to electrification and energy efficiency, and why both of them at the same time. Because they are twin engines of the energy security, affordability, and competitiveness story. And electrification and energy efficiency need to scale quickly and in parallel. Electrify too fast without efficiency, and you blow up demand. Improve efficiency without electrifying, and you're optimizing a system you're trying to retire. So how do you scale both together? Let's find out the answer to that question from a fantastic group of guests we've got with us here today. And I'm going to introduce them one by one. Mike Umika, Managing Director of the Energy Efficiency Movement Association. Anna Freeman, Head of Electrification, the Energy Efficiency Council in Australia. Really pleased to have an Australian on the show because your country is going to be hosting COP31 in Turkey, or with the Turkish government, yes, towards the end of the year. Kingsmill Bond, energy strategist with Ember. I think I've introduced you several times with many, many different organizations, but now it's Ember. I remember you in Glasgow saying, I'm a finance man, this is absolutely crazy. And then we've got Anna Hall, Head of Public Affairs, Energy Division at Alfa Laval. So great to see everybody here. Thank you. Mike, I'm going to start with you first to kick things off. So how is energy efficiency the enabler of electrification? Why?
Yeah, so let me first also give you a number. I think nowadays, in our latest study that we brought out, around 25% of the energy is the cost for the operation. So it's a huge amount already for companies that we have there in terms of the operational expenses. And electrification needs energy efficiency because it's always this balance between demand and the supply side. So it's really great that we can now utilize and make the connection of the doubling down and tripling up even more clear. And we need both hands because you cannot just shift up the supply side while ignoring the demand side. So it is not an either or, it's an and I think this is very important, and I think electrification is another strong argument really to drive both, obviously from its own angle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anna, Alfa Laval sits on the industrial side of this. You're a company, you're making energy efficiency kit, basically, machines, unbelievably good ones. Where are you seeing the biggest untapped efficiency gains right now?
I think there are many untapped gains. I think just looking on ourselves, on our production, for example, we have production sites in 38 different countries, but looking on electrification, our driving force is to get our energy bills down, right? So energy efficiency is really in the core when we work with energy efficiency in our facilities. Just now in Lund, for example, we are reusing the waste heat in our industry, heating all the premises. We reduce our energy bill by 90%. So just doing this energy efficiency and electrification, then with a heat pump, reusing the heat, it is, big numbers we talk about. And that is in the premises that all industries actually can work with energy efficiency. And then we talk system solutions, reusing waste heat from data centers to heat cities or produce things with the waste heat. Then we're really talking big numbers on saving energy.
Right. Anna Freeman, you're head of Electrification, Energy Efficiency Council. We were absolutely, blown away when we were reading the Guardian newspaper just the other week about what has happened in homes in Australia with the combination, I think, of solar and heat pumps and battery storage as well. And you're really a pioneer in this area right now, and that was very interesting to read. How did the country get there? And what role has the Energy Efficiency Council played in this amazing sort of breakthrough in the housing sector?
Well, I really find it the most exciting story to talk about too. There is, for those that don't know, we now have almost 4 in 10 homes, so 40% of homes in Australia have got rooftop solar. Mm-hmm. There is a subsidy scheme that was introduced a long time ago. Initially, it was to kickstart clean energy rollout in Australia, and it started at a 2% mandatory target, and then it grew to 20%. Mm-hmm. So obviously, the government was trying to drive it in, but and I think initially there was a view that this was going to be taken up, something that would be taken up by wealthier homes. But in fact, we've found that some of the most populous areas for solar on rooftops is in fact in the outer suburbs of our metropolitan cities. So it's really been incredibly democratised. So we've basically had a subsidised, that's a subsidy, which is scaling down, tapering down over time to 2030. There's an expectation from industry in Australia that we won't need it beyond then, because really the technology costs have come down so much. The thing that's changed in the last, or been really interesting in the last year, is that the Australian government, in many respects responding to sort of pressure from industry associations like my own, we've had just a glut of solar during the day. In fact, the grids are, in many of cases, we've got a couple of them, or a few of them actually, one main big one between sort of northern Australia across to Adelaide, and then we've got another metropolitan mostly grid in Western Australia. And many of these systems are really struggling with just having a lot of solar in the middle of the day, which leads to curtailment, which is not really good for anyone. So the government last year on the 1st of July introduced a new subsidy for home batteries. It's 30%, and batteries are still relatively expensive. It's a longish payback period. There was a point where it wasn't sort of worth it. But everybody's just been taken aback by how quickly consumers, households, small businesses have jumped on board, and they're now installing 2,000 battery systems a day.
2,000 battery systems a day.
And we've only got, let's say 10.5 million households in Australia. We've now got 430,000 systems installed since the 1st of July last year. So we'll hit 500,000 within 1 year. The government expected this scheme to go through to 2030. Let's see if their money lasts that long. We hope it does. But it's been incredible. But I think it's been one of those things where, because households have got solar, they know with high energy prices, which we've been suffering from, that if they could just store it, then they could cover even more of their costs.
Yes.
And so they're jumping on board. And I think, so this is kind of starting what will become really the full electrification of households. I think the cars next. And then you really wonder at what point. We've got quite a number of places, particularly the southern states, that are quite dependent on gas, reticulated gas for heating in some of the colder states. And I think, a lot of households are going to start asking themselves why they've got gas at all, and start looking to disconnect completely from the reticulated gas network, which makes it an interesting moment.
Why is it called reticulated gas?
Piped.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, fine. I thought it was some wild animal in Australia called the reticulated gas supply, But so Kingsmill, Ember, unbelievable organisation in terms of data, in terms of reports and analysis on what's happening with energy, climate change, and many other topics. You track the data globally in terms of the energy sector. Is energy efficiency currently... where does it fit into this story? Is it going well enough to support electrification, or is it in another direction? What's happening with it, and is it keeping pace with what is needed?
So there are three.
You need a microphone for this one, Kingsmill.
There are three vectors to change ultimately. As Emily Lovins pointed out, 50 years ago, efficiency is actually our first tool in order to drive reduction in fossil fuel demand, and then you have renewables which supply electricity, and then electricity itself supplies final demand. So the combination of all three technologies is driving system change, and so efficiency on its own was not sufficient to drive a peak in fossil demand, but when you add it to the growth of renewables and the growth of electrification, then it does drive change. We're seeing that in one sector and one country after the next.
And does storage fit into this as well?
So storage is a key enabling technology. The only advantage that fossil fuels have over renewables is that they are easily storable. And therefore, when you put storage into the system, it completely changes things. So to riff off your point for a moment, most houses now have fridges. In the future, I suspect most houses will also have batteries, and will have a distributed energy grid with local batteries and local generation. It'd be very, very different to the grid we have at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So who's going to stop that then, Kingsmill? Is that the large power companies, or can they be brought on as friendly neighbours in this enterprise?
Well, it very much depends. Some companies are happy to embrace the change, others resist it. And as so often in the electricity system, you'll even have companies doing different strategies in different locations. So you can't really identify heroes and villains yet. But I think the key point is that the rise of distributed storage and generation is putting pressure upon electricity companies they've never had before, because they always had monopolies. Now you have new solutions which are materializing, and that will in turn force change and also encourage far higher levels of capacity utilization in our grids, for example. And that hasn't happened before because they haven't had to do it, because they haven't had competition. It's a very exciting moment.
Yeah. Okay. The COP31 presidency recently announced this 35 by 35 target, and that is 35% by 2035 of what? Because it's not in my script, so somebody can help me on that. Final energy consumption, yes? Okay. Anna, you were part of that process, that's correct, to realize that target, or were you one of the people involved, or I don't know if it was 10 people, 5 people, or 5,000 people. You were somehow involved in this. Tell us more about what this means and what the opportunities and challenges are associated with that announcement.
So I'm not strictly part of the COP process, not being in government, and the Turkish presidency owns the action agenda as part of the COP31 process, rather than the Australians. However, last year a bunch of Australian NGOs representing businesses, industry associations and climate groups and others were thinking about how we could help to, I guess, promote some strong outcomes from this COP, should Australia be successful in COP31, and started thinking about the opportunity to and the need to place a greater focus on electrification and the demand side of the energy transition, because a lot of the focus has really been on the renewable energy build out. And so I'm pleased to say, and we have just launched yesterday, so I'm the global campaign coordinator now for a new campaign called Electrify Now, that was launched yesterday here in London.
Was wearing a badge. Somebody from Australia, in fact, was wearing one of those. Oh, you've got one too, but yours is much smaller. I saw a big one. There's a big one too.
Yeah. Look, anyway, we've got merchandise to please all tastes. So we are now sort of, I would say, actually almost 50 organisations strong. Our press release said 40, but I'm sure it's growing by the day. Just can't keep it back. But I'm very pleased to say that our engagement with governments over the course of the last 6 months has just been incredibly inspiring and motivating, because there's very much been a strong appetite from the governments that we have engaged with since late last year on this topic. And then the Strait of Hormuz crisis happened, and it's really just, pardon the pun, but turbocharged this issue of electrification. I think the light bulb's gone on for many, realising that electrification really is so critical to what we need to do. We've seen it played out in the newspapers, in the lives of fishermen in Southeast Asia and truck drivers and farmers in Australian outback Queensland, you name it, around the world. We've struggled from the fact that we can't get diesel, and suddenly everybody's realised that you are going to fare far better if you are electrified. And so this is, I think it's this zeitgeist moment now for electrification, and there's a very strong wave of support across governments, which we hope will grow, and we're going to keep beating that drum for the next few years, because this is something that we really need to accelerate. We need to be going 4 times faster than we are today if we're going to align with the Paris Agreement.
You're talking about worldwide?
Worldwide. So we're currently sitting at 21% of final energy consumption in terms of it coming from being sourced from electricity. We need to get to 35% by 2035. Happily, that sounds good. And over 50% by 2050. And that will really see a very large part of the whole energy decarbonisation, energy system decarbonisation task done. If we can actually support that. It needs to be supported by renewable energy, and it needs to be supported by energy efficiency, because if it's not, we're going to just require so much more. As an example of that, can I just give you one last practical example? You know, homes in Australia, where I live, are very poorly insulated. If we can't also at the same time improve the thermal qualities of those properties, we're going to require so much more electricity to do the same task. And as a result, you know, it's really important that these two elements go hand in hand as we electrify. So it needs to be efficient electrification.
Good. And as you say, we need energy efficiency in all this as well, because that takes some of the pressure off having to suddenly roll out huge amounts of extra infrastructure. I mean, this is a way of saving energy and making sure energy is not wasted, like batteries are, not wasting the solar. But you need to make sure you don't waste the energy you produced in the first place, and that's really crucial. We're going to move to another section, but I just want to tell one little thing that a journalist with the BBC kept telling me all day yesterday, is that the fossil fuel industry used to say that the problem with renewables and other associated things is they're intermittent and not readily available. But now after the Straits of Hormuz, we realize that fossil fuels are often intermittent and not readily available.
And they'd forgotten about batteries,
yeah,
presumably.
They've forgotten about batteries too as well, yeah. So, nowadays, you can't really speak about energy systems from a systems level without talking about data centers, or data centers, as my girlfriend keeps correcting me. The artificial intelligence boom is driving a data center build out at an incredible pace, and a lot of what is powering all these centers is still fossil fuel based. Now, Anna Hall, your sector deals with the heat that things generate. And data centers are generating a lot of heat, are they not? What can be done with that heat?
So I think data center is a very important part of the equation, because we're in this AI era. So we are going to boom. We're going to build more data centers. And actually, when you use electricity to cool the racks, actually 90% of the energy is turn into heat. And energy, Amber, you can support me, energy is actually electricity and heat, right? So that is what we need to take care of. And when it comes to data centers, I usually joke with them and say, you're nothing but a big boiler.
A big boiler,
Big boiler, we can use you. And I think when data centers, of course, are struggling themselves to use the heat on their premises, but what we also see now is, of course, in the Nordics, we have a lot of district energy, where we're using the waste heat from the data centers to heat the cities. Odense, for example, data center, one of the big fives are heating the city. Around 8,000 households get the heat from the data center. But we also see data centers establishing in symbiosis with other industry. It can be producing clothes. It can be growing tomatoes. It can be all around the farmers use this hot energy around the data centers. So I think this is a very critical moment where we need to really have ambitions on system level. To discuss how do we build an energy system that will last. And that is then, of course, electricity and heat, and how energy efficiency, electrification, and renewables are all equally important as we move forward. And just a little bit of comment here, because I think, Anna, you brought up something so important here, the business case. That is really now, when we're electrifying, you're talking about that the households are going into investing in batteries or investing in solar panels. We see as industry, how industry is working with energy efficiency as well, electrification. But it's not just something you talk about from a sustainability point of view. It's really the business case. It's earning money. It's saving money. It's lowering the bills. It's really a money maker. And I think that's also where we need to come to, the financial aspect of it, saving money.
Yeah. So it's a good point, isn't it? I mean, because these data centers, data centers, sorry. It's actually because I'm from the north of England and we pronounce data. We say bus rather than bus, and things
Don't
like that.
correct yourself. I think it's correct.
But, it's kind of jumped out of the hat, hasn't it? Suddenly in the last few years, it's like, oh my God, AI, data centers, blah, 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 blah. They're demanding so much, energy to crunch their numbers or whatever they're up to in these little black boxes. So what can be done to bring them in alignment with, this amazing electrification target and the energy efficiency goals? Or does the target actually include awareness of data centers?
Okay, 2 questions, and I'm going to focus. You're going to have to remind me of what that second one is first. We've been in this sort of like intellectual wrestling match in Australia over the course of the last kind of year or two, trying to work out, are these evil and terrible for us, or are they in fact going to be helpful? And I think the more nuanced view now that has emerged is that in fact they are going to be potentially beneficial if we can run them properly, because flexible demand is the dream. The fact that we would have a source, a load on the grid that can come on and off as needed will be incredibly important for the sustainable operation of the grid. We've had some issues where we're maybe overly reliant on, let's say, not reliant, but we've got some very large aluminium smelters in Australia, for example. If one of those went down, we would have a massive issue from a grid operation point of view in the system operator being able to manage the demand and supply. So new sources of flexible demand in Australia are very, very valuable. The question is, can AI not only be a problem in creating all of this new load, but can they also help us by being operated in a smart way so that they can, in fact, shift the timing of which they are doing, training functions, or we can move where those loads are happening geographically with other data centres, but moving it around as we need. So that flexibility will actually need to be an AI-run approach, and in fact is one of the most exciting paradoxes, I suppose, of the data center challenge that we're all facing. But ultimately, I think we've come to the conclusion in Australia that they can actually be beneficial if we can get it right.
Right. Okay, that's an interesting point. Kingsma, what about you? Does this boom in data centers change your electrification forecasts, or what does it do?
So data centers drive electrification. I think this is really worth remembering. They replace doing stuff in the real world with molecules with doing work in the cyber world with electrons. So in broad terms, the growth of data centers is fantastic for the energy transition. So what people have been doing is they've been counting the amount of electricity that's being put into the data centers without thinking about how the data centers themselves will significantly reduce the amount of molecules we need in the real world. So to give you a sort of classic example, if in the old days you would build a wind turbine testing facility with a real life wind turbine and a huge wind tunnel, that takes a lot of energy and molecules to build. If you can do all of that in cyberspace in a data center, it's just much, much less energy and stuff that's required. So to put some numbers around this, and to be very clear, the debate here is really not using data effectively. We're using around 450 terawatt hours of electricity for our entire data center demand. That's 1.5% of global electricity only. So people love talking about this story, but actually it's not that big. And it's likely to double by 2030, so to 3%. And that's a lot of electricity. But if it's essentially adding just over 1% to electricity demand, it's almost certainly going to save between 5 and 10% of final energy demand through efficiency and effectiveness and replacing molecules. So for me, data centers, particularly data centers done well and effectively, as you say, Anna, with flexibility, it's a really helpful driver for the energy transition because it makes stuff possible that was not possible before.
Right. And when you say molecules, you're saying things like oil and gas and coal are molecules, whereas just clarify that, because I know it's cute, but I just want to make sure the viewers understand.
Yeah, so there's a fight going on out there between electrons and molecules to provide us with the energy that we require to do things. Molecules are extremely inefficient and rare and heavy, and electrons are 3 times more efficient and universal and light. And it absolutely is obvious that electrons over time will push out molecules once they got cheap enough. And we're at that moment.
Yes. Mike, what's your take on the challenge that data centers pose for the transition, and can efficiency help?
So I always bring it in again, always on one hand is really taking this system level approach, which also Anna mentioned. Then also obviously taking into consideration what can you do, and can you do it at the right speed? So if you have then heat recovery possibilities, are you able with the speed of growth of the data centers? Kingsmill was mentioning it's obviously doubling to around 3% by 2030. Are we able to cope by also utilizing then the waste heat? Because it just takes time, and you need to have this tripartite inclusion. You need to have the policymakers, you need to have the mayors of the cities, you need to have the data centers, and you need to also have the contractual liabilities in place on how can you cope it. But I also fully believe in that that the solution with AI will help. And it's the question is a bit, is energy efficiency leading AI, or is AI leading energy efficiency? And I think that's then a bit kind of the trick, because again of the fast scaling growth. At the moment, we have roughly a third is powered by renewables, a third by gas, and around 40% is powered by oil. And I think it's really kind of energy efficiency needs to be coping very quickly. It needs to be part of the core strategy from the beginning, that you're also able to bring down the demand side, so you can still scale with the supply side.
On a simple level, if you go and build a data center or a data center, 50,000 billion miles away from the nearest urban conurbation, you're kind of wasting the energy in a sense, right? Because it's hard to do district heating over that distance. But if you have a data center nearer the town, then you can imagine creating, a district heating system using the waste energy from a data center. So it's about planning.
Correct, and it's even twofold. If you build the data center too far away, then naturally you hardly will power it just with electricity by its own, as a natural resource. So you will have then gas, and you will have oil as well to provide the energy. So and then you waste it again. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Every time we talk about AI and data centers, people always see visions of hordes of people losing their jobs, and they don't think that actually there could be also some benefits from AI, right? If handled sensitively, and also the social impacts need to be handled sensitively. But I mean, even the United Nations Framework on Climate Change is saying actually AI is going to be good for climate change to handle all these complex models, which, more quickly and faster. We're coming up to the end of the show, and it requires more of a one-sentence approach here from all our guests. There's always that little trick at the end of a show. Can you encapsulate something in one sentence? And that is, what's the one thing that needs to happen for this to scale? This, I presume, is electrification and energy efficiency hand in hand. Anna, what's the one thing in one sentence that we need?
To make it scale, I think cities will actually be one of the enabling factors. I think they will be implementation vehicles for electrification and energy efficiency in their local parts. And I think public procurement will be a very important part of driving the demand and make sure it's right from the beginning.
Okay, you've already cheated. You've gone more than one sentence. You've
Sorry.
gone to an extremely long 3-sentence structure, but it's okay. Okay.
It's very simple. Economics 101. To increase demand, reduce price. We have to reduce price for electricity, take off all of the extra charges, use flex, and speed up the intelligent deployment of renewables. Do all three, particularly in the global Sunbelt and the global South, we can get prices down.
Mm-hmm.
Kingsmill cheated too.
Oh, yeah, he did. Yeah. But you don't have to overdo it, though.
In the stakes of word economy, I'm going to knock it out of the park for you.
Okay.
political will. That's it.
Thank you. That was a good point.
So I would summarize it in efficiency first principle is enabling the electrification and then take it at the system level to drive competitiveness and also the money making that Anna was mentioning.
Great. Thank you very much, all of you, for being with us here on We Don't Have Time TV. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So we've heard a bit about the technology, we've heard about some of the targets. Now let's talk about the money, because none of this stuff with energy efficiency or electrification is going to scale without financing and without the policy frameworks too that make financing sense. So join us for the second panel. Here we are with some wonderful guests. We've got Erika Gupta. She's head of sustainability at Siemens Financial Services. Is that in Europe, in the US, or globally?
That's globally.
Globally. Fantastic. We've got Ryan Jude. He's Program Director, Built Environment, Green Finance Institute. Great to see you. We've got Anna Hall from Alfa Laval, which is one of the Nordic great energy efficiency companies, but more than the Nordics. You're all over the place. You're all over the world. And then we've got Ailio. Okay. Ailio. There we go. He's Finnish, so that's how it goes. And he's advisor, energy transition, European Commission, DG Energy. Thank you very much indeed. Ryan, I'm going to come to you first. I have absolutely no reason why, but this is in the script, so you're first. Green Finance Institute. For those who don't know it, what is it and what gap do you fill?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me on the show, Nick. So GFI, we're quite a unique organisation in that most of us used to work in finance, and we're now working with policymakers and financial institutions and industry with one singular aim, which is to mobilise capital into the transition. So we work across different sectors. We look at the barriers to investment, and then we work to unlock them. So that could be working with the government on how we direct public finance most efficiently. For example, in the UK, we ran the National Wealth Fund Task Force, which led to the National Wealth Fund being set up. In the built environment sector, my team's currently working with the government on the Warm Homes Plan and how we design some of the consumer loans that come out of the back of that. And then we also work more directly with industry and with financial institutions on designing those products and helping launch them into the market. So it's all about, as you said in your opening there, how do we turn this increased demand for this technology into actual action? And for that, we need the finance.
And I think we had your the CEO of the Green Finance Institute on a show in Belém last year at the UN Climate Conference, COP30. And she was also saying that although you're obviously quite focused on the UK, you're also increasingly joining hands with Europe and other parts of the world as well. So it's not just exclusively UK. Quick question then, what's actually stalling investment in electrification and energy efficiency projects right now? I mean, is it returns, risk perception, or something else? It's a big topic, but yeah, just a quick glimpse into that.
Well, it's a little bit of all of those things, right? I mean, every single investment involves a specific decision by an individual. So if it's a consumer with their own home, they need to look at it and think, is it worth me putting this money into this technology? Will there be a return for me over time? And that might be a financial return. It might be a wider return. You know, an example we often use when it comes to consumer finance is people take out loans for kitchens. They aren't yet taking them out at scale for heat pumps. Why is that? And that's part of the work that we're looking into. And for the bigger investors, again, it comes to what are the risks involved in this investment? What's the return that I'm going to get from it? And we work with the investors and with the policymakers to make sure that we can reduce those risks and start to mobilize the capital. There's lots more around increasing demand and making these things more appealing. I know we'll talk about it more.
We'll talk about it later. If we've got time, we're going to have a good chat. Erika, Siemens Financial Services finances a lot of industrial transition work. That means at the bigger scales, yeah? What does that portfolio actually look like? What's getting funded and what's not getting funded?
So we like to say we're funding the real economy transition, really working with those industrials, but we also finance technology for buildings as well. So electrification, digitalization, and efficiency. So for buildings, for the infrastructure, for industrial sector, of course, as mentioned, but also for the grid and for electrified transport as well. So a broad range that we're providing financing for. And we do that mostly through providing project finance, but also energy as a service or electrification as a service, efficiency as a service. So really looking at new models that help us to unlock that capital that's needed for our customers to be able to take on those projects.
That's very interesting. I think a lot of people don't know about energy as a service, do they? Because we had Bertrand Piccard, this guy, that flew around the world in a solar powered plane in 2015, and he was doing energy as efficiency as a service with support from the European Investment Bank. Isn't that right? And you don't sort of own you don't own the widgets, you don't own the machine, you don't own the gadgets. You actually, in a sense, lease them from a finance package, yeah? And then you pay for that, but you save money, so you've got some money in the pot to pay back the leasing or the whatever, and something in your own pocket as well. So it's kind of a good business model.
Exactly. And you're getting not just the technology, but all of the service for the technology as well.
Yeah, that's right. So you don't have to fix it yourself. Good for also for medium-sized enterprises that don't have a lot of staff, that can do all that. Yeah. So what's needed to increase financing and attract investors to, shift things faster in the right direction?
Well, one of the things we do need is aggregation. So a lot of these projects are very small. So if you can aggregate them into a portfolio, that makes them more attractive for investment. Another thing that we're really looking for is de-risking. So working with the partners and the nonprofits and the governmental organizations to really help us de-risk these projects. Another one is standardization. If you can show that the model works and that you can redeploy it over and over again, that builds confidence in that financing model. And the final one I would say is really partnership. It takes more than one financial institution, one technology company to really address what we need to do at scale. So really looking for those partners and sponsors, other financial institutions that we can work with to create a repetitive process that enables us to unlock capital.
Perhaps also awareness as well. Awareness that there are these possibilities out there to access this kind of finance for your business. When it all seems like it's all too much, there's somebody out there that can help you with, so for example, efficiency as a service, right? And it's really fascinating. Eero, there's a lot of climate policy gets written at the EU level, and I mean I think we've talked occasionally about this, and in the last few years it seems there's more directives coming out of the European Union on so many topics that I don't know how anybody keeps track of it all. Maybe it's not possible. That's why we need AI, and but it's really amazing. I mean, it's really inspiring what's going on. And it covers the cities, it covers regional level, it covers, right to the top of governments. How do you design a framework that can actually work at all these different scales, where it brings in the national government, the city governments, the communities, ordinary people even?
Yeah, that's right. It's a bit of a challenge. So obviously, I think you start with the legislation, and why that? It's to create some predictability and also create rights to consumers, to companies. Things like energy sharing, for instance, which was not allowed actually in much of Europe. So now this is possible. You can share energy with your neighbor, type of thing. Energy communities. I mean, there are many examples. So first you create these opportunities, but that's not enough actually. You have to also create more like competition, obviously, open up the competition, because then you get those specialist service providers, ESCOs, for instance, and service companies to help with everything from, like, say, renovation or something a bit more complex projects. So people will need that help. And then what we try to do is, you mentioned cities, so we work a lot with cities. I mean, we just recently published this kind of a policy agenda for cities, really showing how important they are in getting stuff done, because, you know, we looked at that energy area, 70% of all legislation depends on the cities actually for its implementation. So obviously we want to talk to them, make sure that we hear problems, ideas from them, and we can take that into account when we go ahead. And then very concretely, we've even, you know, created a legal frame where we regions and cities are there to be involved in all these national energy climate plans, which are, you know, key documents that each country will have. So you have to involve those other levels of governance there, so that they become realistic, and you avoid waste. And then there's all kinds of things, and we fund initiatives such as Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which, by the way, today turned 10 years old. So we had a birthday cake we were eating, and here in London, by the way. And so that's again, you know, bottom-up support to help them implement project, get access to finance, all these kinds of things. And then there are obviously funding solutions. We have, for instance, the European City Facility, which is, in this case, funding cities. But there are other types of, you know, money pots which are there in order to get these kinds of more also innovative projects off the ground, and de-risking, like it was mentioned here. And then we work actually a lot with companies, with the industrial sector, and you know, it's everything. Energy efficiency coalition, and, you know, many things. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, you need a good ecosystem of private sector out there to make this work, don't you? You need the Alfa Lavals of this world. You need, you know, the financing coming from, say, the Siemens facility or one similar to that. You know, that's very important, because otherwise it's going to stop somewhere, isn't it? And you need, obviously, in the UK, but also in Europe, things like the Green Finance Institute as well. It is, and then it gets back to partnership. It is an ecosystem of mutually supportive networks.
That's what it is. And I think the companies are excessively important in this, because they can sort of push ambition towards the politicians, who sometimes are not quite as ambitious as you know, and do not necessarily even know what is possible. And I think industrial decarbonization is a big issue today. So, you know, I would hope that companies like yours, you know, that they show that, okay, we can do this. If it's industrial, we can, you know, say, change the pumps. You know, water pump is a good example. I mean, most of them run on 100%, you know, full power, and you just squeeze the pipe to regulate the amount of whatever liquid is going through. That's the way much of that operates. And it's crazy. I mean, you wouldn't like keep a car running full power, you know, pushing the gas and staying at the traffic light, when you wouldn't come to your mind to do that. You know, so there's a lot of waste actually in industrial processes. So they're obviously, you know, for the companies, show example. And then test out and tell us that, you know, think about all these efficiency aspects particularly.
Anna, from your point, industry, can you just outline a couple of enabling factors here? I mean, is some of this legislation coming out of the EU helpful, for example?
Absolutely. I think it brings awareness, but I also would like to echo the finance part here, because I think you brought up so many good things. I think awareness and really talking about it, and what you also brought up here, Erika, bundle up. There's so many people that should work with energy efficiency. You should turn your light to LED light. You should turn the light off when you leave. Industry should work with energy efficiency systems on cities and so forth. But I think I have 4 kids, and if I tell them to clean, no one will clean. But if I tell them, you do the kitchen, you do the hallway, you do the bathroom, then it's happening. So I think this is really what we need to work with, the awareness to really make it happen. And that's when policymakers actually can do a big difference, is raising this is important. And I think from an industry perspective, what we can then work with is to bundle up, as you say. The energy efficiency projects are too small. It's not really getting into the boardrooms. So we need to bundle up our projects, make it into the boardrooms, even have hard KPIs in the boardrooms on work with energy efficiency and sustainability targets. And then also collaborate over the value chain, as we do with the Commission, for example. So Alfa Laval is a part of the Energy Efficiency Financing Coalition that the Commission has set up, where we sit 64 finance institutes, industry, policymakers together and discuss how do we move this forward, and not only on a European level, but also on a national level. So now this European initiative will be national hubs, because these ecosystems are very national. So what are the prerequisites in different countries? So I think that is an important part that the policymakers can take.
I'm going to come back to everybody generally, because we've only got like 7 minutes left. But one thing I did want to ask Ryan about, just on a particular thing, because we are in the UK, is that you were actually, I think, managing in a sense, I don't know if it's you personally or whether it's you and the team, but there's an amazing ambition right now from the UK government to install heat pumps in houses in across the country. And I have two questions, I suppose, is A, how is it going? Because it's become a big flagship thing. Yep. And two, before this really happened, there was a lot of start on heat pumps in Britain. And I even read that even Labour MPs, Labour being part of the current government, that surveys showed that many of them weren't even sure that heat pumps were a good thing. And the question would be, why is that? Is that because there's disinformation out there about the transition and the value of such technologies? So it's a long question, but maybe you can give me a short version. How is it going? But why has it taken so long for the UK to get to this point where it's now in sight of having a serious program, right?
I mean, it's going well, right? And just to the discussion that we were just having, the other thing that policymakers could do is set that long-term ambition that means that the likes of Erica and a company choose to invest into this space. So the Warm Homes Plan, which is what you're alluding to, is by far the most ambitious plan we've seen for home retrofit across this country. £15 billion of public investment, the most we've ever seen committed to. But you're absolutely right that the 10 years before that saw stop starting. We had a future home standard, then we didn't. Now we finally got a new one coming in. There's more homes that need retrofitting because of that. There were various other ambitions, minimum energy efficiency standards that came and went. Right now, we're on a good footing. What we need to do from here, though, is what I talked about at the start, which is making sure that we can make every home be able to access the benefits of having these clean systems. And so the work that my team is co-running with the UK government is the Green Home Finance Strategic Partnership. This is co-chaired by our CEO, Ryan-Marie Thomas, and the Minister of Energy Consumers, Martin McCluskey. And coming back to partnership, it involves the biggest lenders and lots of small lenders across the country, energy companies, Citizens Advice Bureau, and other representatives of consumer groups who are helping to co-design those financial solutions that we need. So it's going well because over the next few months, we're planning to start to launch the first of those government-backed low-interest loans. But they by themselves won't solve this. We're also working to look at energy efficiency as a service. How do we look to scale that up? How do we do that aggregation? We're actively looking at how we do that in the UK to make it investable for larger investors. And we're looking to your question about Labour MPs, about how we improve awareness of these things. Because ultimately, if we speak to lenders right now, they will tell me, we really want to invest in this. We can give the money away, but consumers don't yet see the benefits of this. And that is an information thing. Because right now, the economic choice, the CCC has published today in its progress report, saying that homes that had a gas boiler and a petrol vehicle saw their bills go up 4 times faster since the Iran crisis than those homes in the UK that have an EV charge point, heat pump, solar panel, battery, time of use tariff. So the benefits are there. We just need to make sure people can see them.
Yeah, absolutely. Ram that home. And stop those that would like to disinform the public that, switching to more clean and green stuff might not be a sensible thing to do.
Yeah. And call them out when they say it.
Oh, absolutely. Call them out. Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to wrapping up here. We're coming to the end. Going to have to make this short and punchy. The COP31 presidency, so Turkey and Australia meeting later in the year, had this wonderful target of 35% by 2035. Anna, just tell me what it is again.
It's to increase electrification rate to 35%.
Electrification by 35% by 2035.
Exactly.
How is this helpful from a financing perspective? Do targets like this at big global conferences mean anything to the finance side of what you're trying to do?
Yes, is the short answer. A GFI, our overarching philosophy, is something called transactions to transitions. And that's that governments set these big targets. They say, here's where we want to get to. And it allows the industry to come in behind that to see, great, if we invest, here's where they're trying to get to. And then you need that detailed work on each individual transaction. But absolutely, and I really praise the COP team for their ambition here, because it's going to really help investors and businesses to see the direction of travel that we're going in.
Right.
And I agree that it really does help with that long-term vision and commitment, but also we want to see the policies and the additional drivers for action that come out of that are led by those targets.
I'm going to put this one to Aero and Anna, but you can also join in, time permitting, so everyone agrees more capital, more finance needs to flow into this transition. Where specifically do you think is it not flowing right now? Do you think that the finance, are there projects or sectors or areas of the economy that remain unfinanced, or is it more nuanced than that?
Now we have the finance sector here with the policymakers and industry. I kind of get the impression of talking around with people that the finance actually exists, and I think we hear it here as well. Mm-hmm. It's more these long-term stable environments and signals we need, because we as industry, we are prepared to invest. We are building, multiple factories to produce heat pumps, for example. We are investing heavily because we believe in this energy transition. We have heavy goals on being net zero already in 2027 in scope 1 and 2. We're taking this seriously. So I absolutely think the money is there, but we need to have this collaboration, policymakers, industry, finance as equal partners, and have discussions how to really mobilize capital and signals so we dare to invest long term.
Eero, just very briefly.
Yeah, so I think this long-term perspective is what we need, and we try to keep that as a policymaker, because that's obviously clear. And I think that in broad terms that has held pretty well. If you look at how many go a few years back, look at least Commission policies. So we've been going through crisis after crisis. Usually the answer has been acceleration of the green transition, getting away from fossil fuels, things like that. But where we've seen sometimes difficulties of getting sufficient focus is energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. I think it really shows. It's easier to talk about renewable energy, for instance.
Because it's more sexy, isn't it?
Because so it somehow it's not as sexy as indeed energy efficiency. So that's why we hope really that this is done smartly. And now when we talk about electrification, which is super important, yes, should be done with renewable and also nuclear energy, non-emission energy. However, let's do it smartly, and smartly being so that you first cut the waste in wherever you are, buildings, industrial processes, meaning energy efficiency, and then after that you electrify what's left, because this energy efficiency action is faster and cheaper than building new grids, building new power generation.
Got it. Well, we have to wrap up there. We've hit the time, just slightly over, but not so bad. Thank you very much for being on We Don't Have Time TV, and we look forward to talking about these things again going forward into the future. A long-term policy on information and communications is always good as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. This is a bit of an energy efficiency session that we're having here, and this is the energy efficiency action track that we're having, and a bit of a dialogue here between Mike and myself. We're here for one reason, though, of course, which is to turn energy efficiency from something abstract into something we can actually act on. And because the reality is we don't have time, but we do have solutions, the question is, how do we scale them? Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. And this is also why we from the energy efficiency movement support the energy efficiency action track, because it's not something we can do also alone ourselves. And it's really complementing also the work we are doing. And I'm very, very excited to be part of this collaboration and on the support, because as you said, the technology is existing, but how to make it tangible enough?
And that's what this track is about, putting energy efficiency at the center of attention and doubling down. Not a side conservation, but as a core strategy.
Absolutely. And I think this is really kind of the essence of it here. How can we complement and how can we drive implementation at scale through solutions? And Nick, so from your perspective, why is it still hard to make energy efficiency tangible and also urgent?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very hard, but I think it can be done. I mean, exactly why is because sometimes people like shiny new wind turbines, they like beautiful new solar panels. Energy efficiency is something maybe a little bit sort of unbelievably hard to see because it's sort of invisible. It's all that waste energy pouring into the atmosphere. If we could visualize it more, I think we could probably deal with it faster.
And that gets us back to your platform. So how are you then leveraging your platform to make exactly this happening?
So what we want to do with the We Don't Have Time platform is to actually showcase the amazing energy efficiency actions being taken by the private sector, by governments, by cities, everybody around the world. And we really want people to come forward with their stories and populate our platform so people can see the richness and the variety and the impact of what can be achieved by embracing energy efficiency. So, Mike, your latest data, for example, shows strong momentum, but also big gaps. What stands out most to you?
So, on one hand, we see 98% do drive investments or are intending to invest into energy efficiency. But at the same time as well, we see still cost is one of the biggest barrier. And I think this also requires a short-term payback for these companies. So at the end, we have the implementation is the limiting factor.
So what's actually holding the companies back, Mike, from moving faster?
So it's not just the money, it's actually the data, getting the right data and also making something out of the data, implement the data, but it's also the skill side. So this is another big hurdle that we see, which is then at the end of the day, the efficiency gap that we see in the report.
And if you had to make energy efficiency truly tangible, what's the one message, Mike?
It's something that we can do today. It's something that we can act on today, and it also helps the resilience of the energy transition. It also helps the industries to be competitive. And I think this is really what we have to do now to scale it.
So that's exactly why the action track is about scaling what works and
turning obviously then ambitions into actions.
Fantastic. And making energy efficiency visible, tangible, and unavoidable.
So let's get to work.
Let's do it. Great. So now I'd like to invite a very special guest to the stage. In fact, he's already with us, and he has some insights into these topics, both from an academic and a diplomatic perspective. Please welcome Professor Francesco Corvaro, Climate Envoy of the Italian government. Hello, Professor.
Hi, thanks.
You are a climate envoy of the Italian government. You're also serving as a full professor of thermal science at the University Politecnica del Marche.
Correct.
And your academic work spans renewable energy systems, sustainable technologies, among other things. Okay, so what do you see as the role of energy efficiency, the role it can play in building a sustainable energy system?
So speaking about the efficiency in the energy sector is crucial. I had the opportunity to listen what you said in the previous talk, and it is really important to focus the attention and to put in evidence how much it is important. First of all, for our wallet. In Italy, we understood this very well because the price of energy normally is very high. So all the money that we can able to invest in the efficiency, not only in the buildings one, so in the personal sector, but also in the company, is crucial, because if we are able to reduce the needs of kilowatt hour, this could be important not only for the environment or for the production, but first of all for ourselves, because we are able to reduce our bills, and this is very, very important for a lot of point of view. First of all, for our work.
Very good point indeed. I was just thinking, if you could visualize the wasted energy, which you can do, right? I mean, we've all seen images of maps where you can see the hot energy coming out of the top of a house, for example, right? But if you could match it with a dollar sign or a euro sign that showed how much that house was actually losing every minute or something, then you might have a very interesting way of getting people to think about energy efficiency in a different way. So
there are some apps that are apps that are dedicated to this. If you are able to insert inside the parameters of your house, of your company, whatever you want, you can understand how you can improve the efficiency, or better, how much money are you able to earn, to spend less in comparison with other situations.
Right. I think we need more of these for every single person in the world, so they can see how crazy it is that we're losing all this energy. Mike and I were just saying that there are many energy efficiency solutions that are already available, already proven, and yet adoption is not widespread. And what holds them back, Professor? What, in your view, is going on?
So this is connected with several situations. Sometimes it's tough because we have to renovate some buildings that has an historical importance. So you don't have all the possibilities that you should. Sometimes it's a problem of investment and incentives. It is important to support from the government side some application, like the use of the heat pump, that is crucial if we want to increase the electrification. At the same time, it is a good solution to combine this solution with some radiation panel that reduce the request of energy, because they were able to use water with a lower temperature. So we have several solutions. Sometimes is a problem connected with not enough incentives, or on the other side, we are able to see a lack in the education and formation. So it is important to speak about this, to describe the positive aspect of some solution, and to propose, first of all, to the technical people that should enter in touch with normal people to convince them on the importance of this solution. But contamination, education, formation are crucial if we really want to increase the use of these new technologies that, by the way, are not so new right now. There are a lot. We have a lot of experience about these new technologies.
No, we were just saying earlier that with heat pumps in Britain, there was a time just a few years ago where the average number of members of parliament who thought heat pumps were bad. I mean, that's about education, or certainly tackling disinformation. We are coming to the end of this session, but I was going to wonder, Mike, do you have any reflections on what the professor is saying?
No, I think important is really kind of taking these learnings as well and bring it up to a system approach, so that you can really understand, like, okay, how can one room, one building, one community leverage and take advantage from the technology, and also then at the end make it bankable, so that it's also worth to invest, and that you see then the scale effect and the benefits, and that's really why I'm so excited to see the efficiency action, and then now obviously also afterwards the implementation. So what is really now going on the ground with the solutions and the technologies that do exist.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for being with us again.
Thank
it's
you.
a pleasure. We met together first time, I think, in Santa Marta, didn't we, in Colombia, when the coalition, now I'm told it's not the coalition of the willing, it's the coalition of the doing.
Correct.
That's what the Netherlands environment minister told me yesterday. So that's good. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
So, some more fantastic guests here for London Climate Action Week 2026. We're here at Sustainable Ventures, which is in County Hall, just a stone's throw from the House of Commons on the other side of the River Thames. I'm joined here with 4 wonderful guests in the studio to talk and connect with some of the issues we've been just talking about in the last hour or so. We've got Anna Hallback, Head of Public Affairs at the Energy Division of Alfa Laval. I've got Andrea Haag, who is Vice President of Sustainability at Munters. I've got Mario Giordano. Giordano. Thank you. Global Head of Public and Government Affairs at Signify. And I've got Julia Sauder, CEO of the Long Duration Energy Storage Council. So great to see everybody here. Okay, to everybody, first question. Each of you are here ready to discuss one powerful energy efficiency solution that your organization is already implementing successfully, or your organization is connected perhaps with those who are implementing it very successfully. Let's start with Andrea. Yeah, what's your
So energy efficiency is of course at the core of Munters' business, and some years back we installed chilling of a data center in a Danish town called Odense, and now we're sort of helping out with the heat recovery, waste heat recovery for 11,000 households and their energy use for each year. So I think that is quite amazing, and a technology and a system that should be applied more often.
Okay, and have we got this on the energy efficiency track that we've now got on the We Don't Have Time website? So that's good.
Yeah.
Mario from Signify, what's your number one pick at the moment?
Look, I might speak about LED lighting, of course, but everybody knows that. I mean, the LED lighting is. I mean, we already experienced this. With LED lighting, you can save up to 50% compared to conventional, or even up to 80 and 90 when it's about connected lighting. But I would say I will spend a couple of words about a corporate program, which is more important than the energy efficiency technology itself, because it's a way we try to support our customers. So the way we try to have a dialogue, open a dialogue with our customers, is our own corporate sustainability program called Brighter Lives, Better World 2030. Is the way we keep track and we support the customers in adopting energy efficiency. We set some KPIs, also some metrics to keep track of it. And it's the way in which we really try to care, the way in which our customer can save energy, can reduce emission, and can also have a look at how they can reduce the resources that they are using. I mean, a step forward into the circularity domain.
I thought you were going to talk about energy efficiency as a service. It's sort of closely related, though, maybe.
Let's talk about that in Montreal in a couple of days.
Yes, okay, that's a good idea. Julia, Long Duration Energy Storage Council. I mean, you're drowning in good examples, right? Yes. So trying to pick one is a bit hard, but let's have one, shall we?
I have 6 because I'm not giving you 50.
Okay.
Because it's important to see how we address both power and heat, because long duration energy storage is also energy efficiency. Yeah. So if you're looking at Rondo and Heineken, you're saving on waste heat and repurposing it. You're looking at Kraft Block and PepsiCo, capturing steam. You're looking at CellCube and GW Electric, that's helping with grid stability. You're looking at Noon Energy with Meta on data centers. And you're looking at eZinc and Toyota for transportation and cars and just the manufacturing itself. And Bren Miller and Enel, another utility. So just showing on, off grid, and how long duration storage of 8 hours, 12, 24, 100 hours can provide services that capture either waste heat or provide energy efficiency in a variety of ways. Okay. And there's many more examples I could share, but it's exciting to see the market is starting to provide.
Okay. Anna?
Yeah, I think I'd like to continue with Andreas' example here, energy efficiency around data centers, because that's something we talk a lot about these days. And actually, we have our heat pumps in Odense. We are helping you. So we will, with our heat pumps, then take the low-grade energy and pump it up to higher temperatures so it can be reused in the district energy system, and that is saving tremendous amount of money, and also working with energy efficiency inside the data centers. So actually having the data centers going to liquid cooling, and with efficient cooling, we can decrease the energy demand for cooling with 50%. That's quite impressive, thinking of how many data centers are being established right now.
Okay. Yes, please.
It's also about the evolving data center industries and the AI, because now we're also moving to liquid cooling all the way to the racks or to the chips even. So, I mean, it's always energy efficiency at the core, I think. Yeah.
Mm. So, another question to all. Okay, energy efficiency has so many benefits. It saves money, saves energy, increases energy resilience, and cuts emissions, makes you look more beautiful. I mean, there's so many benefits to energy efficiency, right? We can go on and on. But, so why isn't it happening more, right? And what can we do to speed things up? And who wants to go first?
I can do a quickie because I think we had the panel on awareness. I think this initiative that we don't have time do now with energy efficiency movement, and Alfa Laval being a part as well, on really make energy efficiency tangible. I think that is so important. I mean, if you build a windmill, or even if you put a lot of new insulation or whatever, you can have a picture, and your solar panels, you can have a picture, but energy efficiency is so difficult to really put a picture on it. And so I think this campaign is so important.
That's what I was saying, Anna. We need to visualize all this heat pouring out of buildings and cities and stuff. I know you can do it because we've all seen it before, but then putting dollar signs or euro signs next to how much is disappearing, and then somewhere envision the kind of perfect energy efficient building where no dollar signs or pound signs or euro signs are flying out into the atmosphere and gone down the river systems away, bye-bye. I think that could be something.
Absolutely. I mean, solutions exist. It's not the problem. It's implementation.
Yep, implementation. And I suppose the other question here is, why isn't it happening more? But we can also talk about how to speed things up. And, so anybody want to,
I can speak to how to speed it up as well, because we're realizing how important it is to, when you see the wind turbine spinning, to understand that the money is dropping out of that, but it will fly in the wind if you don't have storage to capture and utilize it over and over again. And we're realizing that when we did a study with Global Renewables Alliance and realized that over 90% of global leaders want to have electrification and energy efficiency in their portfolio because of the savings it provides. So again, it's economics, but also it brings a competitive edge. And so this also really adds the value and makes it energy efficiency not invisible, but really kind of puts the money back in your pocketbooks.
Yeah. Andrea?
So I'm thinking about the scale. You're talking about the pace, but we also need to illustrate the scale, because that becomes real money and real emissions, and then you can get people engaged. I think when it's all pilots and trials and small scale, nobody really bothers about it, but I think that you really need to boost it. And then we're talking about collaboration and cooperation again, then you can actually multiply the scale. So I think that is really important. And that's why we're sitting here. And that's why we join the energy efficiency movement. And that's why we sign all those commitments, because we want to demonstrate the collaboration and cooperation.
Murray?
Look, I'm talking about scale. I think that if we think about lighting, lighting is based on the latest IEA data just released in Q1. It's approximately a conservative 9% of the global electricity consumption, 9%. This number was double digit just a decade ago. So this decrease happened because of the implementation of LED lighting, of course, but is somehow stop or decrease, I would say, in terms of speed. And this is mainly because actually we captured the initial potential with road and street lighting, or in our homes, in our house, we immediately switch from conventional to LED because of policy. I mean, in Europe, all around the world, the Minamata Convention on mercury, and then of course the ban on of conventional lighting or inefficient lighting, and then the performance indicator and objective. But now this is a little bit slowing down. I think that the next challenge is in buildings. Of course, it's very. I mean, we are in a almost renovated building. This building is very peculiar, I think. But there are two different kinds of renovation. There are deep renovation and light renovation. The deep renovation is pretty complex and cannot be done at the same speed. There are also light light renovation, which are not lighting renovation, actually where you can simply, intervene by changing some light points, and it is something that you can do without rewiring. You can even through connectivity, through Wi-Fi connectivity, also add some sensor, connect data that you can use maybe later with some AI technology to further increase the energy saving and connect data for the future. I think it's right. It's in the scale, but also in the way we look at that. With some quick win, we can reduce a lot of energy consumption.
Yes.
Could I just add that on building on what you're saying, I think that we also need the support from some long-term and consistent legislation driving this towards the same development that you're talking about, because otherwise it's a bit on and off. And you mentioned heat pumps earlier, and I mean, you need to have that long-term horizon looking at legislation.
The collective action on consistent policy is what we need to really get us to scale, to deploy, and that is so critical.
Just to comment on that, because we talk about long-term signals, right? And I think policymakers also need long-term signals from us as industry. We are in this game. We're not going to skip out tomorrow. We're here for the long term. So I think these policies, and really have policymakers, industry, as well as Finance Institute work together very, very close.
Finally, and this has to be really quick because we're over time now. The COP31 presidency, so Australia and Turkey, recently announced 35% electrification by 2035, and also an initiative to reduce energy intensity by 25% in the building sector. Your view on these new targets, or one of those targets? This has to be really fast because I'm getting dirty looks from my colleagues.
I think that the foundation is still energy efficiency, and then of course we need to electrify. But we can start off with the energy efficiency. I think that is the most important, and electrify once we have.
So the tripling is really at the heart of it.
I think so.
And the energy intensity in buildings is important. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I think the energy efficiency has the role to reduce the demand. The electrification has the role to shift the demand, and the renewables have the role to generate the clean power, the clean energy. So I think this is a combination. This is a perfect ecosystem. They need to work together. They are not independent.
Yeah. Anna?
I think same here. Always say double down on energy efficiency, triple up on renewables, and electrify now. When we stick to those three together in one sentence, we're home.
And without storage?
You can't do it. It's essential infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's why it's all critical.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much.
So we have another wonderful guest with us here at London Climate Action Week 2026, here at Sustainable Ventures, where we have our studio this week. It's really fantastic, not far from the House of Commons, actually, on the other side of the river. And our guest is Matt Neal. He's Global Energy and Resources Lead at Endava. So Matt, tell us, what is Endava, and what's your role, or what's your part in the decarbonisation of the world, moving to a sustainable future, and all the other buzzwords?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so my role is to lead two of our industry businesses. It's actually energy and resources, but also public sector. So the two inevitably go hand in hand. And yeah, essentially we are a company that does consulting and IT services. So we build products and platforms, we imagine them, we design them. And they're usually to solve big industry problems. So energy transition gets us excited. We want to be part of building the new technology that allows it to happen. And we're a service provider that does that for big energy companies, for governments, for startups, whoever needs the help.
Right. And you've been at the Smarter Cities Summit, which is also taking place in this building today. And what were some of the things you were actually talking about to the audience? What were you trying to say to the people here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there was an exciting buzz about the speed and the pace of change of technology and how some of these, the challenges blocking energy transition and the improvement to the climate are kind of becoming much more solvable and much more achievable. So that was a buzz, but I think also there was still a bit of frustration in the room around, how do we better fund that? How do we make it go quicker? And how do we solve some big problems like an aging grid, which is holding back some of the potential? So it was a nice mix of the excitement around what technology can do with some of the big blockers that we're all trying to solve.
Of course, at the heart of all this is money. And how do we have enough? Is it in the right place? Is it affordable? It comes on different levels. You have a role in the money side too. That's right, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, like as a company, we work in all industries, but we've done a lot of work in financial services and been involved in some really exciting innovations in money and financial systems and fintech, whatever you want to call it. There's some great examples of big infrastructure problems in cities that have been solved through, whether it's home delivery, so e-commerce, makes that possible, and you wouldn't have assumed you could, have someone deliver your shopping 10, 15 years ago, whether it's, things like Starlink, making Wi-Fi accessible. So big infrastructure problems have been solved by freeing up the link between the consumer and money, and the ability to pay for a better service, and it's doable, and technology can do it.
We were talking earlier today to somebody here about the role of central banks, right, in this, and somebody brought up the case of China, for example, that 10 years ago decided it wanted to green large chunks of its economy, set targets for things like renewable energies and electric vehicles and things like that, and then required the banks, or the central bank did this, and then they required banks within China to make loans available to fire this up that had to be several percentage points, I think, lower than other loans for sort of dirty things. And amazing what happened after that is, holy smoke, they created all this stuff, right? I mean, sometimes people overthink it a bit, don't they? Or
yeah, I mean, I think there's the carrot or the stick. So I think maybe in some societies, some countries have more of an ability to push or to mandate or regulate, which sounds like that's a scenario where they could strongly incentivize it. In other societies, you have to incentivize people with a financial benefit or whatever, and you have to make that accessible to the majority of the businesses or the people that want to receive that. So that's harder, I think. I sometimes I'm sure we all wish our governments could just make it happen and we're on the other side, but I think we're going to require to learn from industries that have created models which allow the consumer to pay for that, and it does it in a way which is kind of carrot, not stick.
Is there a lot of funding that could go into kind of transforming an economy to a far more efficient, cleaner economy? Is there a lot of money that's just sort of wrapped up in savings or in bonds or things like that, not really deploying itself with some sort of passion and vision? And do you think that the instability sometimes in the world as well, when you get things like the Straits of Hormuz, everyone dives into something safe, like, I don't know, savings or, government bonds or something? I mean,
I'm not an economist, but there's clearly a lot of funding and a lot of money out there, whether it's pension funds or governments or, fiscal income or, obviously a lot of some of the ideas I talked about that have solved big infrastructure problems have come from risk capital from America. So I think there isn't a shortage of money or funding. And I think most of us can see the business case here. Like it's not rocket science to see that if you can tap into wind or sun or multiple sources and have your own energy assets, that is going to save you money, right? So I think that the challenge is, how do you connect those? And if some of those pension funds or whatever need a 4-year return and it actually takes 10 years to change the energy grid, that's the lockup.
That's where you get a collision between vision and finance.
And I think that's what's quite hard in energy, because it is public-private, and there are lots of silos and communities and homes and businesses involved. So I think that's the challenge we need to solve from a funding perspective. But I do think the money's there, and I do think the business case, if you sort of aggregate it up, makes sense.
Oh, the business case has never been more fantastic, right? I
Yeah.
mean, renewable energy is suddenly as cheap as chips, and if you combine it with storage, then you're probably cheaper than fossil fuels almost anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and the resilience component, which you alluded to, one of the best ways to sort of immunate yourself from some of the macroeconomic challenges or things that are going on is you have a more resilient, more democratized energy system,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then we're not so bothered by the fact that, well, of course we are at a human level, but we're not as bothered from a sort of energy continuity level if things happen in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, exactly. Actually, some friend of mine who it was ex-BBC told me earlier today, I bumped into him, said the interesting thing is that in the past, the fossil fuel industry would say that that renewable energy was intermittent and not always available.
Yeah.
And now we found out that that can equally work quite well for fossil fuels, especially if you attack a country that's got them. Fossil fuels suddenly become intermittent and not readily available.
Possibly less long-term capacity, but no, for sure. No, but I think that the difference, I think, is when you've got lots of different energy sources and you're bringing them together, is that kind of many-to-many challenge. So I think that the sort of binary nature of burning fossil fuel to then put money into the grid to put it through your front door was more linear. I think clearly there's way more energy sources than that. What that introduces is this many-to-many challenge, which I think technology can solve now. It's about bringing the right funding and the right governmental action to make this happen.
Because it's all there, isn't it? I mean, if you talk to companies like Siemens or Schneider Electric or things like that, they've got all the digitalization that you need to sort of make buildings kind of function with far more efficiency. But again, the finance. I mean, how do you tell the lady on the Clapham omnibus or one's grandma why fintech is important for unlocking this challenge? What's different about fintech?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to think about it for me is I'm not saying it's brilliant or the answer, but it's the kind of analogous innovation point. So can we peer over the garden fence and take some ideas from elsewhere? So for instance, if we want to incentivize the right behaviors around energy, you look at some of the insurance type models where if you go to the gym a bit more often, your insurance premiums come down. Or you look at payments. So a huge amount of innovation has occurred in bank-to-bank, person-to-person payments. The idea you could just tap your phone 10 years ago was crazy.
Right.
So that in itself, if you can actually transact human to human, that enables things like microgrids. It enables you to trade your energy assets, and also then it's trading. So more recently, the idea you could sit and buy shares from your sofa and decide which ones you buy and sell them. When I grew up, that was, you had to have a broker, and you had to be pretty rich to have a broker. So I think the trading platforms, the incentive schemes, the ability to make payments, it's all there for some sort of value exchange platform. And a lot of those innovations have come through things like fintech, where they've solved certain challenges. So for me, taking ideas from elsewhere to help solve this challenge is great. And I guess we've just got to figure out what's the next step, particularly for energy and some of the slightly more infrastructural, blockers that exist in that particular industry.
Because it seems that with energy, if you got a huge scale project, it's easier to raise money for a huge scale project than from a cheaper, lower scale, smaller project. And yet, for many people, this is about trying to make them financeable. You need to bundle them in some way, don't you? To then people go, okay, that's worth investing because it's big enough for me.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely that investability and that sort of, not having lots of little small projects or solutions, whether it's solar panel on one person's house and a battery in someone else's shop. So I think aggregating it up at a point where it's
it's got to be 10,000 shops that need battery storage, right? And then suddenly it's doable.
So but equally, that again, and admittedly, what we may not want this to happen, but certain people have invested in solving infrastructural problems, whether it's like taxis such as Uber, and those companies have not made profit for 6-7 years, and somebody fronted that.
That's
because
true.
they knew that you could collect through e-commerce
Yeah.
a whole bunch of money off people if you made that service work. So
Right.
either a government's willing to pump prime it and do that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can collect at a micro level, at a consumer level with technology today,
Mm-hmm.
or there has to be some aggregated scheme or trading platform where
Mhm.
we can make it investable for different types of funding like banks or pension schemes or whatever. But I'm not really sure what the answer is, but I think it's possible.
Yeah. Good. Well, best of luck with your work. I mean, if it can unlock greater action on climate change, sustainability, affordability of energy, and so that our cities are greener and more livable places, then that's, you know, God's work. And yeah.
For sure. And I guess the last thing I'd say, you know, no matter what, you know, God's way, there is a lot of work to do. I think one of the things we've focused on it in Dava is how do you develop technology really fast? We've got an approach for that called Dava Flow, which is our end-to-end engagement lifecycle where you leverage AI to do this work. So whatever answer it is, there's going to need to be interoperable platforms. We're going to have to spend time modernizing some of the legacy technology, but you know, we got the method to do that, and I think there's going to be work to be done. So we're you know, we're ready for it. Other people are ready for it. So yeah, all good.
Okay, good. Thank you very much indeed for being on We Don't Have Time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Good. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So we have some wonderful guests with us here at London Climate Action Week 2026. We're here at Sustainable Ventures in County Hall, not far from the House of Commons, on the other side of the River Thames. And we've been talking quite a bit this week about the Santa Marta conference that took place in Santa Marta, Colombia, well, over a month ago. It was the Transition Away from Fossil Fuels conference. It was very exciting. We were the official global media actually partner there in Santa Marta. And yeah, it was governments, but it was all levels of society looking really at the issue is how can you get off fossil fuels in a kind of sensible, reasonable, orderly way that doesn't lead to economies being damaged or people being damaged, but also gets us really fast down the road to decarbonize the global economy. There was something called the People's Summit for a Fossil-Free Future. And I believe that your organizations and you individuals were also part of that People's Summit for a Fossil-Free Future. And we're going to hear a bit about that. And I'm first going to turn to my first guest, which is Osprey Oriel Lake, correct?
That's right.
Okay, good. Executive Director of We Can International. And then we've got Catherine Gaia, Ecological Justice Program Manager at the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And Benjamin Carvajal Ponce.
Yeah.
Good. Founder and Executive Director of 1.5 NGO.
That's right.
Not bad. A little bit of Spanish there.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, thank you very much. I did some. Okay, I did 1.5. Yes, of course. I did a little Spanish at school, but I don't remember much of it.
You did it great.
Osprey, you were on site in Santa Marta for the amazing conference there. You participated in the People's Summit. Tell us a little bit about what your experience was at this conference and what were your main takeaways from it?
Yeah, I think it was an incredibly important conference at our organization. We've been engaged in the COP process for, well over 12 years. So I think it was just so needed that we could actually have a conversation that was centered, as many people have said, not if we should be transitioning off of fossil fuels, but how. So it was really, I think, a very important process. I think it created a lot of momentum that we need to continue. And I think for civil society, obviously we can't represent all of these organizations. There was over like 1,000 civil society organizations there, which is also fantastic. But I think it was a real door opening in the way the process happened for civil society to engage with governments in a really frank way, to have frank conversations. I thought that was really valuable. And that we can also be in a space in which we're not waiting for governments to work just out of process of consensus, but actually being able to have there be a process of voting where we can really move this process forward to move off of fossil fuels. And I think some of the big takeaways that we noticed is that we were able to express that we want a legally binding agreement. And I'll just close with one point, which is we know yesterday that there was the release of the outcome documents from governments. And I was really excited to see that there was a real statement about the fact that governments and all participants at the conference really want there to be a mechanism for legally binding agreement. And I should say I'm also on the steering committee of the Fossil Fuel Treaty. And so I'm really thrilled with that outcome, that there's a real need for that mechanism. And so, yeah, I'm really hopeful about that.
Okay. Catherine, you wrote a report, or co-wrote a report called Double Dividend ahead of the conference. Yeah, what is the double dividend?
Yeah, sure. So we wrote this report together with the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative as well. And the whole name of the report is The Double Dividend, How a Reduction of Military Spending Can Finance a Global Just Transition. And we are basically arguing that a reduction and reallocation of military spending is one of the most significant but politically avoided levers to finance a global just transition. And there were a few kind of key global developments that compelled us to write this report in the first place. And one of them is the fact that military spending has been rising for 11 consecutive years, reaching record levels last year at almost $3 trillion. At the same time, we're seeing record levels of armed conflict around the world since World War II. So this common narrative that we need more military spending to get more peace is false. And then at the same time, we're seeing that, the same governments that are spending billions on their militaries say that they don't have money for climate finance. And specifically when it comes to just transition financing, there is very little that is currently allocated to that. So we know that there's around 3% of the little climate finance that is available that is allocated to just transition financing. And so we are arguing that military spending is reducing and reallocating military spending is a win-win, because military spending, an increase in military spending correlates with an increase in emissions, and military activity contributes around 5.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And if we put that into perspective, the global civil aviation industry only emits around half of that. If the global military was a country, it would be the fourth largest emitter. So, if we turn this around, if we reduce military spending, we reduce emissions, and at the same time, we have public finance available for financing the global just transition. And another kind of win-win that we would have is that, and we know this from history, that if we reduce military spending, if one country decides to reduce military spending, it creates the condition, it sends a signal to other countries that they are open for cooperation, for diplomacy, that they want to build trust. And in this current climate, when we so urgently need this global just transition, we need for countries to come together and for a different climate to emerge, because right now, multilateralism is very fractured.
Yeah, I've got you. So, Benjamin, we'll just get some comments from you, and then we can maybe talk a little bit more granular. So you were in Santa Marta, and so what role were you and your NGO playing, 1.5 NGO? What role were you playing? What were you trying to achieve?
Well, the first thing, or every time that I speak about Santa Marta or this summit about transitioning away from fossil fuels, I like to start with data. And what is the data like? 75% of the world's population lives in a country that needs to import fossil fuels. The other assumption, actually, that the energy policy have built in this assumption is that fossil fuels are like cheap, reliable, and the safer option. And the renewable energy is expensive, is not reliable, and etc. And Santa Marta was specific in the perfect momentum when like the world was seeing that fossil fuel are really expensive. Fossil fuel is expensive, and actually this 75% of the population that need to import fossil fuel, most of those countries need to subsidize those fossil fuels. So we pay for them twice. First, when we go to the pump or when we buy, of course, the fossil fuels, and then in our public budget, because we need to subsidize because they are like really expensive. So there is a number analysis really like cool that is that like 72 countries need to import this fossil fuel and they spend almost 1.7 trillion per year. What is that? Well, actually, if we talk about the climate negotiation, in 2029, we were like asking civil society to move like 1.3 trillion to fund like all the climate solutions. So imagine like if we put that money, just a part of that money, just 1.3 trillion per year into instead of fossil fuel into climate solution, maybe we are not gonna like subsidize more this problem. So one of the narrative actually 1.5 was like bringing to Santa Marta is just not like it's for a climate solution or like a climate reason. It's because they are expensive, so we are talking about also our economy. And if like most of the country of the world and most of the people in this world like need to import something that they don't have control, and they're every time they're like more expensive if like actually like just one leader decide to have some movement, so it's like gets more expensive. It's like, okay, why not to be like or to work in our like sovereignty? It's a very complicated word for a Spanish speaker, but it's like let's work for a safer future, a cheaper future, right? So that was the narrative. In Santa Marta, actually, we talked about like a lot of the problem of the fossil fuels, but it was not the only topic. We also talked about solutions, about how we can guarantee, how we can build this like future cheaper and together. And the role of the civil society is to put the term just.
Yeah,
it had to be grounded, or like it had to be fast. It had to be just. It had to be also human right based. That transition away from fossil fuel, because we're also talking about employees, community. For example, Colombia really relied to export a lot of coal. Actually, Chile imports the Colombian coal, so we cannot do that or like phase out all the fossil fuel from one day to another. We also have to do it with responsibility and also thinking into the people and our ecosystem.
Okay, thank you for giving us that heads up. Yeah. Good. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the International Renewable Energy Agency reported the other day, if you combine renewables with storage, there's no place on the planet that fossil fuels are competitive anymore. As long as you've got storage with the renewables, you've solved the problem, right? Osprey, you brought out a report. The Women's Earth and Climate Action Network released a report on transition mineral mining in the just transition. And presumably mining includes petroleum products as well, does it? Or is it?
No, this is mineral mining.
Mineral mining. Okay, fine. But it's comparable in terms of the concept, I suppose.
Well,
what happens?
Yeah.
So give her the findings of this one.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that was very important about civil society being in Santa Marta is, one, it was very positive because we had these open discussions, but I also think it's really important to say that there is a gap between what governments that were there of the willing and still the push of justice from civil society of what our solutions are. So I think it's important to point out that there is a gap.
Okay.
And we're pushing forward for more justice and a different path to solutions. So as an example, we are looking at the fact that we don't want to see the same kind of economic modalities that we're seeing with the fossil fuel production, where we're seeing more and more extraction, harm to communities, violations of indigenous rights, the harms to women's bodies because of the toxins from extractive industries. So we want to push forward the idea, of course, of phasing out fossil fuels and bringing in renewables. However, and the however is quite large, how we do that, how much. And so this report that we released is really encouraging this transition, but I'll give a few examples. We're asking for disaggregated data. So right now, when governments are talking about their mineral lists, as well as companies around minerals, you can't really tell the difference between what minerals are actually needed for there to be energy justice, meaning everyone has renewable energy. Countries that don't have electrification, how can we support communities having electrical renewable energy? Separated out from militarization, going back to your point, which is growing, and separated out from data centers, which are taking off exponentially. So right now, it looks like so much mining is needed, which will be equally harmful to the communities we're trying to protect and ecological integrity, that we need to start demanding that these mineral lists are disaggregated so that we can have transparency and really say, actually, this is the limited small amount of mining we need for the transition, and let's remove militarization, let's remove data centers. That's a different conversation. And so that's very important. And then the other thing that I think is important to say is that we can't just say we're going to have this new renewable energy sector without addressing overconsumption of the global north and the fact that we're continuing an extractive model. And that is not working for the earth. That is not working for frontline communities or in the long run for any of us. So it's also time for critical conversation about what is our relationship to nature, who's benefiting, who's not through this extraction process, and how do we begin to also transform our economy to be looking more at circular economies? What can be renewable energy? What can be refurbished? And also looking at our lifestyle. I mean, it's not going to be resolved just by business as usual. So if we just substitute one extractive economy for another, we're not really addressing our human footprint in a way that's going to be really sustainable in the long term.
How would you answer those that might say that the UN Framework Convention process is so loaded with issues, right? So full of the whole paraphernalia of challenges of society and humans and things like that, that it's become a very slow and very sluggish delivery of the ability of the world to manage this existential threat of climate change. And that what was fun about Santa Marta was honest dialogues were available, but also there's a clear target. It's exiting fossil fuels, not forests. It's not coral reefs. We need to get off fossil fuels, because if we don't do that, we are doomed. We're going to sail past 1.5, we're going to go past 2, and maybe we're going to go 3, 4, and hell is all let loose, right? So how do you make sure that the issues you represent and you're passionate about can be part of the conversation, but are not a block to the action of exiting fossil fuels? Do you see the point I'm making?
I think so.
Okay.
You know, if we create all these obstacles, then how do we proceed? I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's how do we ensure that the Santa Marta initiative process, whatever we call it, doesn't become a mirror image of the UNFCCC, which is all the world's problems are almost in the UNFCCC, right? Everything's there. And that leads to some governments, I think, being able to escape their responsibilities because they say, you know, blah, blah, blah. Whereas Santa Marta is meant to be agile, quick, fast, save the world from climate change. And then maybe we can deal with some other things after that. I mean, I'm not saying it should be like that. I'm saying that could be a danger. No?
Well, put it this way. Justice has to be at the center.
Right.
And so if we move forward and it only works for some people, we don't really have a solution. And ultimately, I agree, we need to move, you know, at speed and scale. There's no question about that. We have to get off of fossil fuels. No question about that. But this has also been a problem all along, is that there needs to be the proper foundation and addressing root causes while we go along, or we'll end up here again. So, if we don't have a holistic approach, and I agree, we should stay focused on getting off fossil fuels. That means renewables. So it's on the same topic, but how does matter. And, as an example, we work at Weekend with a lot of frontline communities, Indigenous peoples, Black and Brown communities. So if we're like, we've got to barrel ahead because this is the time we're in, if you live in those communities and your children are dying because of the poisons from the mining operation and your community's dying, that's not an answer for them. So we have to not replicate these ideologies that some people matter and some people don't. So we can't avoid this, but I still think we can move at speed, but we have to ensure that the people who are making decisions account for everyone. It's not so difficult. The difficulty is people want business as usual. People want to make money off of the pollution, make money off of the transition. And we need to back down on that point and say, maybe it won't make as much money, but let's be fair to everyone.
Yeah, because renewables is booming right now, isn't it? And, which is good on one level, that it's doubling every 2.5 years. But you're saying there have to be safeguards for communities. And I think also there is this possibility, though, maybe that is one area of encouragement, that because of consumer action over things like, these rare earth minerals being mined, say, in DRC, some people are nervous about their mobile phones, aren't they? They're nervous about things in renewable energy systems. And you're starting to see universities in places thinking, okay, maybe we don't need that rare earth mineral. Maybe we can retool copper, for example, to have some of the rare earth metal. It's stimulating human creativity to find some answers, and that's positive. Tell me a little bit, Catherine, on the military spending again. Is it just military spending, or do you look at other perverse spendings? I was thinking of fossil fuel subsidies, actually, to be honest, which is so rivetingly, absolutely massive and crazy, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So to your question, we only focus on military spending, but there are other amazing organizations that exactly look at fossil fuel subsidies, that look at debt cancellation. There are so many levers available to us that we could use to finance a global just transition. So I really don't think it's about that we don't have the resources. It's about political will. But I'm so happy that you wrote this report, and all of the analysis that you share about how we can make a renewable energy transition just. And I think the aspect that you mentioned about militarization of renewable energy mining is really important. Militarization and linked to mining, because what we're seeing is that the military is setting the agenda to mine minerals. And for example, we see the US government being very interested in minerals, even though they're clearly not interested in
Greenland,
renewable.
for example.
Exactly.
We're all popping over to Greenland now, just to take it over.
I'm from the US. We're buying Greenland.
Oh, that's what we're buying it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So the US is interested in minerals, and they're not interested for renewable energy technologies, but they're interested to use it in their militaries and for AI data centers. So I think it is really important to make this discussion broader and to really, as you said, center justice, and to really challenge the militaristic, patriarchal, extractivist system that has always had the same losers, which are mostly in global majority countries. And, even if we phase out fossil fuels, some of us in the global north might be happy, and it might not be as hot as we were fearing it would be. But as you pointed out so vividly, there are so many drawbacks if we don't center justice and renewable energy.
Benjamin, are you from Latin America?
Yes.
You're from
Chile.
I'm from Chile.
But my heart belongs to Latin America, so I am Latin American that I'm born in Chile.
Yeah. Is it important that your continent, in a sense, is associated with what's happening in Santa Marta? Is it empowering for the people, hopefully of Colombia, but also of Chile, of other parts of Latin America, because there's some positive things happening in many parts of your continent, right? It's not, yeah.
Totally. Actually, it was really interesting because we were talking about minerals. And Latin America's countries, as for example, Peru and Brazil and even Chile, they provide these minerals to the world. Actually, Chile provides the 40% of copper.
I know.
Critical mineral for actually for the transition of the electricity, for the transmission, and also lithium for batteries. Chile has the 30% of lithium storage of the lithium minerals nowadays. So it is totally true that, okay, how we can also show to the people the benefits of the energy transition. And those benefits are economic benefits, in their daily life, how this community can live also with, or can feel those benefits. So coming back maybe to the question that you were asking, it was really important for Latin America. Latin America has one of the cleanest electricity mix, but not energy mix. Latin America rely a lot on hydro, and it is it's improving on solar and wind. Actually, for example, in Chile, almost 65% of the electricity mix come from clean renewables. But then when we see the energy mix, 66% come from fossil fuels. And actually, Chile has to import 98% of the fossil fuel consumption because we don't have almost fossil fuels. So, for example, for us, it is we use the narrative, of course, of the climate because we have a commitment, an international commitment to reach the net zero emission by 2050. But it's also we talk about economy, we talk about how we sovereignty, how we make this country also safer. But when we start to see the different countries, for example, in Argentina that has a lot of natural gas, or also Brazil that now is trying to explore oil, Ecuador also oil, Peru, it's okay, let's start with what is the needs of the country and how one country can cover their own needs, right? And then we don't start to to feed at the end this fossil fuel international market that has been really complicated actually this year with this energy crisis that actually the International Energy Agency said that is one of the biggest energy crises since the 73. So it's okay, now we have to switch that dependency. And one thing that I wanted to say before, but I forgot it, is when we talk about solutions and this thing, I really love an Ember analysis that we can cut 70% of the money that we spend to import this fossil fuel in these 52 countries that need to import fossil fuel. If we use it, electromobility in transport, heat pumps, and renewable, those countries that host the 70% of the world's population can save 1.3 trillions. So again, as you said, it's not about the money. It's where are we putting the money? And it is the best investment. Are we investment in our future?
No, exactly.
I don't think so.
We've got to.
Latin America has to see that.
Yes. So maybe it's the right time for these issues of justice to come through, because the world now has a solution, right, to climate change, which is now the renewables is cheaper everywhere than fossil fuels. In a sense, that's been one of the biggest challenges, right? To get to that point, right? Now it's there, maybe a bit like in Rio in 1992, when that was meant to be the Cold War dividends. So we got a climate treaty, we got a biodiversity treaty, and we got a desertification treaty. Maybe the time is right that some of the justice issues now are resolved, because we know economically we can do the transition if we want to. So maybe it is the time for this.
Yeah, I think it is, and it needs to be. I think one of the the outcomes that we see from civil society at the COP and also in Santa Marta. Let's talk about climate finance for a moment, because it's also about the money to do the work of the energy transition
Mm-hmm.
is, one of the key demands that has been present in civil society for a long time is the fact that a lot of the global South countries want to make the jump to renewable energy, but they need the financing for it.
Yep.
And so a key demand that we have always held is that finance needs to be in grants and not loans that are creating more debt.
Sure.
And this responsibility, when we're talking about justice in the energy transition, also involves, a different understanding of what is fair, what is responsible, and the fact of common but differentiated responsibilities, and the fact that how we look at it a lot in our own organization is that these funds from the global north need to be moved to the global south for this energy transition because it benefits all of us. And there's also a reparations element, which is also connected to justice, which is the global north has been extracting from the global south for a very long time and putting the global south into debt, which is part of the barrier for that transition to happen in a good way.
Yes.
And so I think we need to address that justice issue. And, even in the recent ICJ report that was lifted up also in the recent UNGA vote, there's a responsibility, a legal responsibility for countries to also work with the finance of how we're going to do this.
So I'm being given a 2-minute sign right now. So any last points that you would like to make, Kirsten?
Yes, I also just wanted to speak briefly to the People's Declaration and to use that as another reason, as you mentioned, how maybe this is a time for justice and maybe there is real hope that this can be integrated into a fossil fuel phase out, because I think the People's Declaration has been so incredibly strong in focusing on justice and in bringing such a diverse global civil society movement together, and having such a deep root cause analysis and this demand for structural transformation. We suggest solutions in the People's Declaration. And I think what's been really encouraging also is now seeing the outcome report by the Colombia and the Netherlands that has picked up on a lot of these really quite radical demands and suggestions from the People's Declaration and from civil society and everyone involved. So it does give me a lot of hope that we can see something meaningful, hopefully internationally binding, coming from this.
Good. You have very short point.
I totally agree with everything that my co-panelist said, but probably something that we are going to see in COP30 now, COP31, it is the age of electrification.
Yes.
But that electrification needs or has to have, like, it has to be clean.
Yep.
First of all, equitable and distributed.
Yes.
Electricity bills are still so expensive. So how are we going to ask to the people move to electrification if they can afford?
Yes, exactly.
So that is one of the challenges.
Absolutely. And we also have to make sure that the fossil fuel companies don't say, look at all this renewable energy, it's costing you all too much. You must get back to benzene, petrol, and a lot of disinformation going around, which is another topic too. Just to say briefly, I did interview with Bernardo here, my colleague, the Dutch and the Colombian ministers last night. And I thought they came up with a good line, which was, it's no longer the coalition of the willing, it's the coalition of the doing. So I thought that sounded quite fun, actually. Yeah. Yes, good. Thank you very much for being on We Don't Have Time, and best of luck with your work.
Thank you for the invitation.